used to believe that the American West was a close neighbor, but when we look now and we see a bulldozer type of politics, brute strength prevailing, to rounds of applause of some and wails of despair from others. But we believe in a different project, a project where democracy is fairer, more interesting, more fruitful, one where we respect all citizens, even those the most minority citizens, where everyone is master of their own future. This project is one where we have a shared truth, and that shared truth is the way forward. That will bring our nation together. It will create unity, and it will wipe division from the tables. I used to believe that
I could be wrong, but it sounds like he's blaming America for this. It sounds like he's blaming America. He's like, I believe in a shared vision. I believe that we can do so-and-so, and we have a bully, and blah, blah, blah. Sounds like you are blaming America for your issues. Now, to be fair, nobody told France to be a vassal. France chose to be a vassal. And if indeed you choose to be a vassal, and you decide to take certain policies that are to the detriment of your own government, it's on you. We in America didn't vote for you. Your own citizens voted for you. Francois, I think this last name is Barou. I am horrible at French. I don't speak lick French. And I'm going to butcher his last name, but I think this is Barou. He gets taken out pretty badly, actually. So the National Assembly vote ended up being 364 to 194 as a no confidence vote. That takes him effectively out of office. The government has collapsed. Macron is going to have to choose another person. You have people who are calling for Macron to effectively step down, to leave. Macron, if I'm not mistaken, is at a 50% approval rating himself. And he has wedged himself in. It's like, chakra blah, chakra blah. Macron is funny to me on several levels. In one part, being beat up by his wife, I think he's a battered man. There's that. Two, if you remember during the European parliamentary elections, when they were calling for those elections, Macron party loses badly. And what does Macron do? With all the arrogance of the world, so he disbelieves the vote, collapses the government, and calls for another vote, in which case his party loses miserably. And what do? Instead of Macron putting in, let's say, the person who won, or the party that won, he chooses, if I'm not mistaken, Bonnier, who nobody chose. And it's just another hack for him. He flames out also, in which case Francois gets put in. Francois just got taken out. Now, a lot of this has to do with a huge budgetary issue where they effectively wanted to cut expenses and cut costs, seemingly at the expense of the poor. Now, I want you to put this in context, everything I'm about to tell you, that they are still trying to support the war in Ukraine, still increasing their military budget as they deal with all of these budgetary concerns. Now, as I would point out, if you are a German citizen and you are seeing your businesses close down, and yes, I'll move to Germany for a second because I want to make a point. If you're seeing your businesses close down, if you're seeing people get laid off in mass, you're seeing your industries either leave Germany, and then you get somebody like Merz who comes out and says, we need to cut benefits, while simultaneously, collectively as Europe, giving $100 billion to Ukraine. What do you think in that situation, right? You're telling me my life needs to be worse because you want to have a war that was unnecessary? And this is exactly what is taking place. Their debt, $3.4 trillion. This is well over 100% of their GDP. To make this even worse, they claim that they are putting on 5,000 euros every second. 5,000 euros a second. It says the $43.8 billion deficit cutting program unveiled last month targets a 5.8% budget gap. Now, keep in mind, The European Union only allows a 3% budget gap. They're at 5.8%. This is failure on a massive level. And this also goes to the whole thing where France is, and the UK for that matter, we're talking about trying to get IMF loans, which is just, let's be honest, humiliating. What they wanted to do, the proposal includes scrapping 2 public holidays to boost productivity, cutting public sector jobs, freezing welfare payments and pensions, which are typically indexed to inflation. The plan has sparked backlash by the left-wing parties accusing the government of prioritizing military spending over social welfare. That seems to be obvious at this point. France's military budget is set to rise to $64 billion in 2027. That is twice the amount it was paying in 2017. And Macron has effectively pledged an extra $6.5 billion over the next 2 years, claiming that there is a growing threat to security. Sure. So we'll see. I mean, I don't get the sense that Macron's ego would allow him to go anywhere, despite the calls for Macron to effectively step down. But sacre bleu. Down goes Francois. Down goes Francois. So we'll see. That's humiliating. And not just humiliating. France continuously tries to leverage the poor to deal with its financial concerns. If you remember, the Yellow Vest movement, how did that start? Because Macron turned around and decided that he wanted to effectively put a fuel tax to increase the cost of fuel on the population, which of course was going to hit the poorest the most. And they turned that mother out, to put it mildly, where you had protests going on for 2 years with 70 to 80% of the population supporting the Yellow Vest movement as it kept going on year after year and month after month. It's old hat for France. This is old hat. I want to bring my man in. It's late, and I always feel bad when you come on this show, Jeff, because I know how late it is there. Welcome.
Okay.
How you doing?
I had an afternoon nap today, Jamal. So
So you're up and spry. Fair enough. Fair enough. Jeff Rich. Jeff Rich is author, historian, podcaster who worked 33 years in government. He's now retired. He's currently lives in Melbourne, Australia. Jeff has spent a lifetime studying history and how knowledge of historical currents can help give context to our changing political world. You can find Jeff on YouTube on the Burning Archive and find him on his Substack page at jeffrich.substack.com. And as I always say, I recommend Jeff a lot. I love his channel. He does great work. Jeff, I was showing the audience this before you got here, and I'll play this one more time because this speech is just special. And I want to get your take on this speech since I've already given my take to the audience. Let's play it one more time. This is Francois Bayrou, I believe this is pronounced. Bayrou?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Bayrou. Francois Bayrou.
We used to believe that the American West was a close neighbor, but when we look now and we see a bulldozer type of politics, brute strength prevailing, to rounds of applause of some and wails of despair from others. But we believe in a different project, a project where democracy is fairer, more interesting, more fruitful, one where we respect all citizens, even those the most minority citizens, where everyone is master of their own future. This project is one where we have a shared truth, and that shared truth is the way forward. That will bring our nation together. It will create unity, and it will wipe division from the tables.
Jeff, France didn't think this way when it was screwing over Haiti and with the double indemnity. France didn't think this way when it was screwing over Africa. I mean, I had a guest who was talking about the Sahel states, and when France was effectively kicked out, how they burned everything, destroyed everything. And even now in the Sahel states, there's a widespread belief that France is effectively doing everything in their power to destroy and punish the various people because they are pulling away from France. However, they're complaining seemingly about America and seem to be blaming America for decisions that they themselves made in their own country. Give me your take on this. Maybe I'm being too brutal. Give me your take.
You could be a little bit brutal. I mean, you know, of course, America's to blame for everything, Jamal, but, you know. Look, France has certainly got a, you know, colonial heritage and, you know, as you say, you know, sort of, in a way, still a kind of de facto, well, it's crumbling now, but, you know, has had a de facto empire in France in Africa until quite recently. I mean, I think he's probably referring more to the sort of trade tensions and also some of the sort of political meddling from J.D. Vance and Elon Musk, as well as some of the, I mean, I think Google was just fined some astonishing amount by the European Union for, you know, sort of uncompetitive sort of advertising practices according to EU competition law. So there's some very significant and real disputes between America and the European Union, which I'd probably say the European Union has right on its side as much as America. So I think that is the case. And more broadly, I guess there's I mean, you know, there's a great political division, but also, I guess, social division within France. So I guess there is some reference there to America, but I don't think the political crisis is really driven by America, nor is the, you know, fiscal problems of the French state really driven by America either. I mean, if you think back 18 months ago, it was after, you know, President Macron was re-elected as president in the 2022 elections, and he introduced pension reforms, you know, changes to age pension rules, which were extremely controversial, had people sort of, you know, relatively violent, like property damage type violent protests on many in the streets of many French cities, including Paris. I believe someone burnt down Emmanuel Macron's favourite restaurant in punishment for the action. So it was quite a high level of civil unrest. But that was raising the pension age from, you know, by international comparisons, very low age of 62 to 64. So, you know, there are, you know, particular social protection, social welfare sort of measures that are, you know, institutionally established in France that reflect, I guess, a consensus within French society, but also that consensus is probably breaking down as well. And some of those things are also driving the budget problems. And some of the, you know, I mean, some of the talk on X and all that sort of stuff is about, you know, France collapsing and requiring IMF bailouts and all that sort of stuff, I think is also probably a little bit overdone.
To be fair, that wasn't just on X. Those were screaming headlines. Yeah, those headlines were like, France and the UK require IMF bailouts and everything else. That's what they're making that from.
Yeah, well, I believe they don't. At least France doesn't. Britain might be in a different situation because it's no longer in the EU, but France, there's a particular sort of financial stability mechanism that the EU has that France could draw upon. So, you know, it's got a high level of debt, but, you know, the French government has a lot of assets and it's not going away anywhere soon. So sometimes that level of debt, you know, people like to focus on it, but it's perhaps not as critical an issue as it's sometimes made out to be. I mean, they have a significant...
France is not a sovereign currency either. So it's not like they're making their own dollars as a country. No. And I'm not contesting what you're saying. I'm just pointing out that they're 5.8% over their budget. I think it's more than 100% at this point. I think that number sits at, let me get the exact number. Where's it? I just set that thing up. I just had the number up, but they are well over 100%. Here it is.
Yeah, it's about 118% of GDP.
Yeah, so it's 43.8 billion euros. Apparently their debt is growing by €5,000 a second. That's the way he described it.
True. But their deficit, I was just in preparation for this, I was just checking some numbers this afternoon. Their deficit is like 5.6, 5.8, it fluctuates year to year. That's their budget deficit as a percentage of GDP, whereas Australia's is about 2.7%. But, we've been, abstemious public spenders for quite a long time now.
Yeah.
You sort of, all the mean dudes have been in control in the Treasury Department. But Japan, for example, has a budget deficit of 6.2% of GDP, and the USA has a budget deficit of 6.3% of GDP. So it's definitely a problem, and it's a problem they need to address. And I think part of the reason it's spilled out now in terms of this political crisis is that there's no effective way in which the current National Assembly or the different parties within the National Assembly seem to be able to work together cooperatively or even competitively in order to sort of solve the issues. So it's sort of like, and there are some people who have almost said that Bayrou has sort of knew he couldn't solve the budget problem, wants to be a candidate for president at the next election in 2027, and would rather sort of go out in a blaze of glory saying, I tried my best, but I was frustrated by all those bastards, rather than sort of try to solve the problem and sort of fail. So it's difficult. But, again, it's a reflection of the political division within the system. There's about 12 parties within the National Assembly. It's broadly broken up into 3 broad blocks, none of whom, are really prepared to fully cooperate with each other. And within each block, there's divisions. So there's the sort of nationalist right, including Marine Le Pen's party and a few others. There's the sort of green left, socialist left, and there's within that quite a more radical group within it called France Insoumise, which is translated variously as France Unbowed, or some people might, it's sort of like, it has connotations of rebellion. And the French Socialist Party, and then there's the sort of progressive centrist Macronites in the centre, and they're just unable to form an effective government at the moment. So it's a bit of a problem.
Kind of. I mean, I think it's worse than that. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I could be totally wrong. I was at the European parliamentary elections. I was covering it for the radio station when they took place. France's Macron's party got crushed. Right now, their debt stands at $3.4 trillion. Now, for the United States, we would be over the moon with a number like that, right? We were at 37 trillion. But again, it's based on the economy. France is not a sovereign currency. When you point out Japan, for example, Japan is their sovereign currency. They control the money that is coming out. They control their yen, right? The United States controls their dollars. France has to deal with a central bank. That is not the same thing as France producing whatever the currencies that they were producing prior to the European, to the euro coming into fruition. That's a big deal, because they can't just print money if they need to print money in the way that the US can just print money, or the way Japan, if they need to, can print money, or Australia can print money if they need to.
Yes, I mean, that's true. But I mean, the EU, I think, is the second largest reserve currency in the world,
It is.
after the US dollar, and that's its sort of currency. So
France?
and it has significant stability within the broader EU zone. But I mean, I don't want to downplay it, but there's also, you know, amidst all the drama, there's also, I mean, you could see this as kind of a rolling crisis that's been going on for several years since 2022, and this sort of highly fractured political system with a series of difficult problems to solve because, you know, fundamentally they've got to raise the pension age and no one likes to tell people to work longer, really. And
I don't blame them, though. I mean,
I know, but you know, it's curious, like at the time of the protests back 18 months ago, Vladimir Putin commented on it and said that, you know, we went through a similar problem not so long ago in Russia because they had to do the same thing because every society has to do this with aging populations, sort of, you know, redefine the boundaries of the limits of the working age. And but he said, you know, his impression was that Macron and his government sort of handled it rather ineptly, and that does seem to be the case. They just didn't handle it politically terribly well as well. But but there still needs to be some sort of solution to, you know, the nature of the benefits, the age limit, all these kind of things. And it's, you know, solving sort of age pension, social security systems is one of the most complicated things you can do in government because you're talking about, you know, people's life plans over 50 years, their savings, there's so many variables and issues and you know, so many different circumstances. You know, clearly raising the working age for some retired government pen pusher who sets up a YouTube channel is one thing, but for some guy who's done back-breaking work on the railways for 40 years, you know, to tell him to work for another 5 years is a whole other thing, you know. You know, there are those kind of issues as well. But
I can accept
I think the problem is the political crisis is really quite deep there and doesn't look like it's going to be solved very easily at all.
Well, I think there are two problems, and probably more, but two definitely stand out. France's military budget is set to rise to $64 billion in 2027, twice its 2017 level. So effectively, in 10 years, they doubled the military budget. President Macron has pledged an extra $6.5 billion over the next 2 years, citing growing threats to European security. So I am going to look pensioners and people in the face and say, hey, I need to cut your holidays. I need to freeze welfare payments. I need to do all of these things that's going to affect you directly, just as the regular French, because I need to increase the military budget and give all of billions of dollars to Ukraine, which is effectively what they're doing. Even Germany, where Merz comes out and says, yeah, we need to cut the welfare system. We can't afford this, while simultaneously deciding that they're going to give all of this money continuously to Ukraine. If I'm a German, if I'm French, if I'm just regular, you know, rando European citizen, and I'm sitting at home watching my president, watching the news about my businesses closing down, industries shutting down, my life getting that much more fraught because these guys are making a decision to effectively cut benefits. And yet I'm hearing in America, by the way, we're getting a 10% premium on the money that Europe is spending for the war. Europe is paying entirely for the war. And on top of that, they're going to be buying billions of dollars of weapons, hundreds of billions from us over the course of X number of years. How am I to take that?
Well, they may. They may.
It may not happen, by the way.
Defense industry,
Yeah, it could be nonsense. I'm just pointing out that is the reporting. And if you are sitting at home and you hear, so wait, you're going to cut my vacation and you're putting all of this money into Ukraine? They may not even buy the premise that these guys are running with. Like, that is a hard sell. It will be a hard sell for me.
It's absolutely a hard sell, and you can see that in the reaction. So there's going to be this thing tomorrow called block on two. So sort of block everything, sort of kind of, you know, to hell with everyone kind of sort of protest.
Well, they do protest well in France. They do protest very well.
Yeah. And I believe there's going to be a national strike next week, sort of bringing back memories of the 70s. Memories for some of us.
It's like, shut it all down. Shut it all down. Yeah.
So yeah, there, and I guess we'll see. I saw some vision of sort of National Front type protesters, wearing black balaclavas and shouting "France for the French" as well. So there's that, significant sort of social, integration of both the ex-French colonial population. And the sort of migrant populations as well, who are often, in poorly serviced, poor quality housing in sort of, not quite ghettos, but certainly poor parts of the French cities as well, with, significant ethnic prejudice from at least some parts of the community, as well as issues with, the kind of issues you have with social integration in those circumstances. So there's a lot of division there in France, and not much sign that anyone's really got a very... and even within the left, this France Insoumise group, which is the French Unbowed, I think people are translating it as, is saying it does not want to form a government with the Greens and the Socialist Party. It wants to force Macron out.
Yes.
And ultimately actually to force a change in the political system. So they're talking about a shift to like the sixth French Republic. It's currently the fifth French Republic. It's the current constitution's been that way since 1958. France has... a little bit more innovative in the way it runs its political system than the United States. They don't sort of get stuck on the founders back in whenever it was, 17.
Are you implying that they weren't God-given to us, Jeff? God didn't write the Constitution and hand it to us.
And one of the virtues of the Fifth French Republic has been that it's delivered strong majority governments. And that is... there's a clear majority in the National Assembly that has been on the whole the same party as the French president, because the president has powers, the sort of executive powers, and the prime minister has powers as well.
Yeah.
But that hasn't been the case over the last few years in France. Since really 2022. It's been quite a mess, and in a way, it was starting to fragment before then. Indeed, Emmanuel Macron is an example of that fragmentation, because, he was a response to the disintegration of the Socialist Party and whatever the previous sort of centre-right party was. I can't remember its name, but they basically disintegrated.
I thought it was Renaissance.
Oh, well, I think Renaissance is the new version of the old sort of the Jacques Chirac party, because that one, I mean, they both imploded. So the party system sort of imploded in France, in the, I don't know, it was the 2010s, early 2020s. No, it would have been the 2010s, I guess. And so Macron is this sort of new party who, that reflects, social interests and all that sort of thing, but it, hasn't got the same sort of organisational roots as, the old trade union movement or the old Socialist Party or even the old sort of business connections as well. So it's sort of this new political system in a way, in an old constitutional setup, and it's all not really coming. It's just not sort of sorting out the sort of problems that they really do need to sort out. I mean, even if you take the defence money out, they've still got a budget balancing problem to solve. And ultimately, that's a question of coming to political agreements on what you spend and what you tax. And they're always difficult decisions to make But they're the kind of decisions that at the moment France is not really able to make. But then, America's not really been able to make them terribly effectively in recent times either.
We can't talk.
Was Doge.
Our government doesn't work. I mean, we literally have a political system that just doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
So, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
The thing that I saw, though, that was wild to me was the National Rally is the main political thrust in France. Like, if you're looking at the numbers about who's more popular than the other political parties. And yet, they did everything in their power, the horse trade, to keep Marine Le Pen, her party, off of that from winning a majority. And in doing so, created that much more of a fractious political system. Now, part of this is obviously Marine Le Pen wants to make certain changes. She's not her dad, so there's that, even though they always kind of take her back to Vichy, France. They have been very skeptical of the war, which is something that the European Union has frowned upon, whether that was the AFD, whether that was Romania, any of those nations where they say they have tools to deal with it, going so far as to even convicting her and making sure that she can't run in another election, which is very, quote unquote, coincidental, to put it mildly. That has to have contributed to the issue. I know why they did it. Meaning they would say, hey, you left-wing party, we don't agree with you, but we think you have a better chance in this area, so we'll give you our votes. They're doing that nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, it's partly a product of the electoral systems and how the electoral system, like all different electoral systems, work in different ways. I mean, basically, like for example, in Australia, they have this preferential voting system. So basically, you choose to name one, and then you say who your second preference is. And if your main vote doesn't get number one, it sort of flows through to someone else.
But that's a good thing. That's a good process.
It's a good thing. And what happened in France, in my interpretation, is they basically have a first past the post system. But what they did was through the coordinated action of the fragmented different parties, because, even Marine Le Pen's party only got 30-odd% of the vote. So it's not like she got 51% of the vote and she was robbed. She got 30% of the vote, so 70% of the people didn't want her. And a fair majority of that 70% sort of coordinated their action between the parties to, sort of agree not to stand against each other and things like that. So effectively all they did was, I'd say it's like a preferential voting system, but organised.
It is not. Come on, Jeff.
Action.
It is not.
In its result, that's what they were doing. They were saying, we want all these left parties to, because it was this new Popular Front, which is a very evocative term in France, because it's, the anti-fascist movement from the 1930s, the Popular Front. And so, we're saying it's anyone but the National Front. Let's make sure our votes for each other don't exclude each other from winning. So we can't do that through the electoral system. We'll have to organise ourselves so that we don't stand against each other in the final round. That in the end, whoever has the best chance in each seat should be the sole person running from this group of parties. So that's what I mean. I know it's not. It would be better if they actually had a preferential electoral system, and then that would just flow through in terms of actual votes rather than this sort of, conspiracy, if you like. But it certainly left a bad taste in people's mouths, both on the right and on the left, about how it was organised. And then the fact that Macron said, well, bug you, I'm not going to choose any of you. I'm just going to choose someone from my party that got, 0.2% of the vote.
He chose Barnier, who didn't last. And now Francois.
I guess
the point is, there's a difference, though, between, let's say, the public saying, this is my second choice, and a political party making a determination of who's their choice. Look, it's one, if they really did believe that her support wasn't sufficient to win it, then they wouldn't have done that. They did it because they believe that what they have 10 different political parties, that those political parties would have split in such a way where the national rally would have most likely taken power if they left to their own devices. I'm saying, I give an example. We had in the United States, there was this famous leak that took place where you had all of these people who were running for the Democratic Party. One of the people, one of the higher ups, goes to one of the candidates and says, hey, we want you to get out the race. Nobody's going to vote for you anyway. You're not going to get any money. And we're not going to give you the support of the party. And the guy was like, what do you mean you're not going to give me the support? How are you having this conversation with me right now? This is supposed to be an election where people choose. Yeah, that's cute that you think that. It's that, where it's not the individuals in the country that are making a choice. If you have a country that is supposed to be a quote unquote democracy, and that democracy allows people to make a choice, you may need a choice that gets the bombs out because that's what the public wants. And instead, what you ended up with was keep the bombs in, allowing Macron to effectively choose 2 people, not even from the political parties that won. It was France's Unbowed. That group was the one that won, was a leftist party. And what did Macron say? I don't care that you guys horse traded into whatever weird configuration. I'm choosing this guy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so wrong.
No, absolutely. And I think this is partly why there are these calls, including apparently Bayrou himself has actually called for this, to have a new constitution effectively to sort of move through to the 6th Republic. And it is feasible that they could go there. I mean, Macron's term goes to 2027. He has to leave by then. Coming up with a new constitution, you've got to have a pretty big crisis to drive that. Losing a war in Ukraine and having a big budget problem is probably, and a totally unmanageable political situation is not a bad crisis. In 58, it was partly the conflict in Algeria and this same. This is what the 58 was when the Fifth French Republic came in, and it was the post World War II French republics were this sort of revolving door of governments, and so they changed the constitution to get a more stable system. So, I mean, there are clearly people advocating and proposing and thinking about making that kind of shift in France. So I wouldn't rule it out as a possibility, but I don't think it's likely to be a possibility, like immediately. But Macron could surprise. It could be his final, endowment to the nation, to sort of, give it a new constitution that enables some of the weaknesses that have emerged in the current French Republic, given its distance from, how society's changed and all that sort of stuff. The breakdown of the party system, he could well arguably consider it, but I'd say it's probably not the most likely immediate possibility, but I wouldn't rule it out. I've always had this theory that he wants to move on from president of France to head of the EU and make because he's always been a very strong advocate of stronger European integration and European sovereignty. And I don't think, for the talk about vassals, I think he genuinely does believe that is core to his political project and his sort of intellectual beliefs. But, you can only do what you can do within the circumstances that you're in. And Europe doesn't have as much power and money and guns as the United States. So it sort of is limited. But yeah, I've always imagined this scenario where he maybe, sort of gracefully takes himself out saying, yes, I know I know I've wrecked things here, but let me seek your forgiveness by solving this intractable problem of our constitution, and I will go on to lead the European Union as, you know, a Frenchman is destined to do.
Yeah. Do you think they're going to push them out?
He'd probably be quite good, because I mean, I think the European Union probably needs. I don't know whether he's got the ideas to do it, or if there are people around him who's got the ideas to do it. But the European does need to find a different way of managing its sort of political integration and managing its sort of defence relationship with the United States. It needs to, you know, make that more independent.
Yeah.
You know, maybe Macron, who has been, you know, president of the second largest, you know, one of the largest states of the EU for 10 years, has the heft to sort of work through those sort of issues. But a lot of people also think he's just a flake and make jokes about his wife and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I just feel a lot of that is just, I feel a lot of people have a very, I don't know, distorted view of Macron, a very emotionally driven sort of view of Macron, including in the sort of YouTube commentariat. But I suspect he's a much more substantial figure than some of that sort of sort of criticism.
He's sitting at 15% approval. They can't stand him. I guess he's perfect for the European Union. Do you think they're going to push him out? Like, do you think this is going to be a situation where they're going to get rid of him, or not so much?
Well, it's possible. I mean, you know, but, you know, what happens then, I guess, you know, then you have to have a French presidential. So it's sort of like, and who's going to win that? And given that there's like 12 parties and the leading contender is, you know, Marine, or, you know, Rassemblement National, the Marine Le Pen party. You know, if 70, you know, the parties representing 70% of the vote have a choice between, you know, blowing the place up and letting someone they really don't want to have in charge get in charge, they're not going to blow the place up, are they?
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to say, well, you know, yeah, well, you know, worst of a bad set of options, but let's, you know, best of a bad set of options, let's go with Emmanuel. He'll be gone in whatever it is, 18 months' time anyhow. And, you know, he's going to have diminishing influence. Let him focus on EU issues and foreign policy, and, you know, cede more authority on domestic issues to the government. You know, the National Assembly formed government, the Prime Minister, and, you know, he can sort of go out, if you like, gracefully, rather than in a sort of a cat fight sort of thing, where the outcome would be highly unpredictable. So I suspect he'll stay in there through the force of, I guess that's like an inertia force, but it's also a kind of he's better than the National Front. And, you know, some of these black balaclava masks saying France for the French that have been going on in France over the last couple of days, I mean, I don't think they're a terribly good look.
Yeah. Last time that we talked, you pointed out that the Kalis video, who I love, by the way.
I didn't. I have to explain to viewers, defense. I hadn't seen some of the other things she said at that point.
Oh, we're going there. I would like you to also defend this comment by Kalis. She is so adorable. I think she is so attractive. Like, God, man, the stuff that she says is just so outlandish. This is her.
You know, the Chinese are very good at technology, but they are not that good in social sciences. Versus, you know, the Russians who are not good at technology at all, but super good in social sciences. So what are they doing? All the actors who are trying to make us weaker, they are actually, finding the little fires that are existing in our society and pouring fuel into those, and both sides.
Jeff, are the Chinese just fantastic?
That's indefensible.
Is it?
I mean, it is true. The Russians do have a very fine tradition of historical and social sciences, but I feel like there's some marketing, like 25-year-old, political marketing whiz who sort of read something somewhere and said, "Here's a good line," and Kaya, this is how we can explain it. It's dreadful. And then there was some other comment that she made that was really just indefensible about,
I have that one also,
Russia and China winning World War II. Where did that come from?
Yep, I got that one for you too. I wanted to play that
fantastic.
one for you also to see if you're gonna, it's like, God, I would love to meet her in a coffee shop. It's like, God, you're so smart. You're so smart.
Russia was addressing China, like, you and like Russia and China, we fought the Second World War. We won the Second World War. We won the Nazism. And I was like, okay, that is something new. But then you can see, first you can, if you know history, then it raises a lot of question marks in your head. But I can tell you, people don't really read and remember.
I love that last comment. Oh, I love that last comment. She's like, these type of days, people don't really read. And that's after
I feel I should send Kaya a link to the Burning Archive YouTube channel and point out my videos.
You
I did a great one on Rana Midda's book about the forgotten ally and China's role in World War II. And, Richard Overy's book on, World War II as well. So what she's saying is just astonishingly foolish, insulting, and dumb. And I think in that interview, I did say at some point there does need to be personnel changes in the EU, including Callas. And there were I think the point I was defending was the view that there is actually no ultimate solution to the Ukraine war, or political, social solution to the Ukraine war without Europe and Ukraine involved. But, that kind of thing also demonstrates that there's no solution to the Ukraine war with Kaya Kallas involved either.
Yeah. That's astonishing that she's like, and she's so confident when she says it. She's so confident. It's like,
when you read history, well, I do, Kaya.
Right. Oh, she's so confident. I love it. It's like, you're so attractive. You're so, man, you're so great. One last thing. What time is it? Okay, I'll let you go because we're getting close to the end. Jeff, thank you for this, man. Great breakdown. We have a huge, 1.7 thousand people here. Jesus Christ.
Fantastic.
Yeah, most are on Twitter for some reason, and they saw French collapse, and they're like, "Oh my God, what's happening with France?"
Yeah.
Jeff Rich, just so the audience would know, Jeff Rich is, there we are. He is author, historian, podcaster who worked 33 years in government. He's now retired. He's currently lives in Melbourne, Australia. Jeff has spent a lifetime studying history and how knowledge of historical currents can help give context to changing world, or to our changing world. You can find Jeff on YouTube at the Burning Archive. It is a great site. Send it to Kayla's. Send it to her. She needs it. God knows she needs it. There needs to be like a fundraiser to send that site to her. And find him on Substack at jeffrich.substack.com. And also send her my number. Just call me.
Yeah.
It's like, you're so smart. I tell her she's smart all the time. Thank you for this, Jeff. You be safe, okay? Have a good night.
Ciao.
Bye. All right. Yeah, she is great. Which is that she is basic as mud. It's fascinating to me that she could make it to that position in the European Union. I'm still shocked by it. And on some level, I guess you could say that's kind of a rot. In the same way that Trump could make it to president. I think her being able to make it to a position, in fact, all of those idiots being able to make it into the positions that they ended up in, feels like a rot. I want political leaders to kind of be smarter than I am. More, I don't know, aware of historical currents, more of outcomes. If I do this, this is what's going to happen in the larger world, and this is how I'm trying to gauge the world. She is not that person. She is not that person. I keep saying Estonia is like Planet of the Apes. I keep saying it. I keep saying it. Not fully mean it. I am terrified of what most likely takes place in Estonia. I was freezing with Jeff, and so I was killing a lot of my links and everything else in the background, hoping that that fixes the issue. But we'll see. We'll move forward and see if that fixes the issue. Tucker Carlson, before I go into my next guest, we have about 5 minutes. Oh, that's not really enough time to go into the story, but that's okay. France is not the only government that has fallen. Nepal has also fallen. Now, the Indonesian government has been able to maintain itself. Nepali government, not so much. And apparently, there was a social media issue right here. In fact, I'll just bring it up here. Nepal's Prime Minister, Sharma, I think this is Ali, and 3 ministers have resigned after the protests over the alleged government corruption left multiple people dead in the capital of Kathmandu. Now, I've been to Kathmandu, so that kind of sucks that this is taking place in Kathmandu. In fact, the last time I was in Kathmandu, they had a king. The king killed his brother and stole the money from the treasury. Parliament told the king to leave. The king, and when I jumped into Nepal, there was this kind of tension because nobody knew what the king was actually going to do, whether he was going to fight it or otherwise. The king eventually just took the money and left. The demonstrators, led by mainly people in their late teens and early 20s, erupted on Monday after authorities banned several major social media platforms, including Facebook, X, and YouTube. The protest turned violent, with 19 confirmed dead in Kathmandu and about 400 injured, including more than 100 police officers. While the government revoked the ban on Tuesday, the violence continued. Protesters reportedly stormed the Nepalese parliament, set it on fire, attacked Nepali Congress office, as well as the homes of several politicians. I do not have, do I have images of this? Yeah, I don't have video of this. Actually, we do have video of this. All right. This is the Nepali government or parliament, I suppose, being burned. Maybe not necessarily to the ground, but at the very least, set afire, set ablaze. Here's the catch. Here's the catch. Does a government have the right to control its information space? Now, this is an argument that Brian Berletic makes all the time, and Brian is completely right about this. Let's go back for the moment, and let's take this out of Nepal and put it into the context of Russia. You had a Ukraine war, and you had Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., that would allow you to say anything on behalf of Ukraine, but nothing on behalf of Russia. So imagine what takes place in the bias that's built into it. If you allow Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all of those platforms that are effectively American platforms into your country, into Russia, and you're able to produce propaganda in one direction and never a response any other direction, then you're obviously creating a bias against your own interests as a country itself. You've lost control of your information space in that context. Now, I got to be honest with you. I haven't necessarily entirely read into the story because I just saw the story this morning, but I am pointing out that the information space thing is real. From my understanding, at a cursory glance, it was a situation where Nepal, where these countries didn't necessarily want to follow the rules that Nepal was setting for social media platforms. And so it's like, hey, we're American platforms. We don't have to follow your laws. We don't care about the laws in your country. So, you know, you could F off. And when Nepal responded, you ended up with protests that were totally organic, that came out of the blue to effectively create all sorts of violence and murder people and set government buildings on fire. That seems like a massive overreaction, especially if you're ignoring the fact that the platforms apparently were just blowing off the laws and the local laws of Nepalese government. So Brian is going to be here next week, and we can get further into this notion of controlling your information space. But whether it's Nepal, whether it's Indonesia, many of these countries, it's the exact same thing of this need to be able to control. God, man, I'm so conflicted by that. I live in America, and this controlling information space is just, to me, ways of propagandizing your own population without any kind of contrary information, kind of what Europe did, right? Europe shut down any kind of information coming out of Russia in order to isolate what is taking place in Europe, so they can just get fed and inundated with propaganda without contrary points of view. Same thing with Nazi Germany, right? Where it's like, if you listen to British media during the war, you will be put in prison for 10 years. I don't trust governments. I don't trust any government as an absolute. So that's always dicey me. But we can have a large conversation about it. I want to bring in my man, though. I am joined with Shobhan Saxena. How you doing, man? You doing okay this morning? Shobhan, I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
How you doing? You doing okay this morning?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you, Jamal? Good to be on your show again. Okay.
Well, thank you, man. I'm glad to have you. I'm Shobhan Saxena. He's Indian journalist based out of Sao Paulo, Brazil. In a career spanning more than 30 years, he has reported for the Times of India, the Hindu, the Indian Express, and various other publications in India. Right now, he's an international correspondent for DD India, the international channel of India's public broadcaster. And I would imagine having some damn good food while you are there doing that job. I'm glad that you could join me, man. The reason I asked you on is because of the emergency BRICS summit that took place. Lula, I believe this was last week during the SEO summit and during the Victory Day celebrations in China, in Beijing, called for an emergency summit. And his main and primary reason is we are being attacked. Like, Trump is going after us with 50% tariffs for us prosecuting Bolsonaro. You have India that is getting hit with 50% tariffs. He's backed off of Russia for the time being, but Russia already has, like 20,000 sanctions already applied against it. He's backed off of China because, in the words of Carl Jha, China has them by the balls. But for all intents and purposes, even South Africa. Give me the results of this first, because I want to step into this before I get further into this. I mean, obviously, they talked about closer integration and those type of things. But were there any tangible results from this meeting that took place yesterday?
I think, Jamal, more than anything else, this meeting was a show of solidarity between the BRICS countries and developing countries. You can't expect some tangible results or some signing of some agreement on a virtual meeting. And the BRICS meeting was held recently in July in Brazil, in which Prime Minister Modi had participated, and President Putin and President Xi Jinping could not participate in that meeting. So I think this meeting was kind of a continuation of the process. So they joined this meeting, and that BRICS summit happened before the tariff war was kind of launched against Brazil, against India, and against other countries. So I think this was an expression of solidarity that all these countries, they stand on a common ground. They want fair trade, and they want more multilateralism and not unilateralism. So that message has been given after this meeting. How that message will be received in Washington, D.C. is anybody's guess, because Peter Navarro has already used very, very strong language, calling the BRICS countries the vampires of BRICS. So we know what's going to happen. But I think it's important for BRICS countries individually and collectively to stand their ground. And I've been reading the statements coming out of the meeting, what President Lula said, what India's Foreign Minister Dr. Jaishankar said, what President Xi Jinping said, that all the BRICS countries, they stand for a fair trade and cooperation and multilateralism, and not less transaction, not trade barriers. Because, this is a very interesting phenomenon, what we are witnessing in international global economic order. The Western countries are less and less in favor of global engagement or global economic order. Their approach is now more unilateral, especially the US, but the developing world and the emerging world, they want more globalization. They want the economic cooperation at the global stage to continue, because as growing economies, They want more trade, better supply chains, and more growth for the people. But that is not the case with the US or even European countries anymore. So overall, I think it was a good meeting. A message has been given, and it shows that the BRICS countries have a lot of commonality. They may not agree on everything, but as far as the trade barriers are concerned, they agree on a lot of things. And let's see how what kind of reaction comes from Washington. I don't think it will be very positive.
Speaking of that reaction, I will show you some of the reaction that is coming out of Washington right now. It is rather deranged and hyperbolic, but I don't think you would have expected anything else. This is
to the United
Peter Navarro.
The bottom line is none of these countries can survive if they don't sell to the United States. And when they sell to the United States, their exports, they're like vampires sucking our blood dry with their unfair trade practices. So, look, let's see what happens, but I don't see how the BRIC alliance stays together, since historically they all hate each other and kill each other. The bottom line is...
Wow. Wow. So you guys are vampires sucking the blood of America. You all hate each other and kill each other constantly.
Yeah.
And this is going to be over. That is hysterical. I mean, like, that is hysterics, like in full-blown hysterics, which makes me think that, you know, he is clearly concerned. Nobody acts that way and says that without being that shrill, without necessarily being concerned by what he's effectively saying. He's saying a withdrawal from America. That's what he's saying. And I don't think he's handling it all that well. And so you get this bravado of, oh, they need us. We're indispensable. They'll come back. India will come begging us to come back. Scott Benson said that nonsense the other day. Give me a take on that. You guys are all bloodsuckers, sucking the blood of America. Are you killing each other? So BRICS is going to just fall apart. It looks like BRICS is expanding.
Yeah. Besides the language, I think I have basically two problems with what Peter Navarro is saying there. First of all, he says these countries cannot survive without the US. I mean, that's not true. I mean, also in a globalized economy, I mean, the US cannot also survive without doing trade and business with some of the biggest economies in the world. I mean, for God's sake, I mean, US has about $750 billion of trade with China, $140 billion with India. Same with Brazil. And with Brazil, I think they have a trade surplus of more than $40 billion. So that's a bizarre, why would you impose sanctions or tariffs on a country with which you have a trade surplus? So it's in a global economy, no one can survive without the other. So if you take the collective trade that US does with BRICS countries, it will be into more than $1 trillion. So can the US survive without the BRICS countries? That is a question. Let's go back to 2008 when the world was hit by the global financial crisis and the American banks and corporations were, just going down the drain one after another. Who saved the global economy? It was the BRICS countries. Yeah. India, China, Brazil, and the economies of these countries were least affected. And they were not affected because they had solid banking system, rules and regulations, unlike US, where all the rules and regulations have been given away in favor of big corporations, and banking system was very fragile and it was going down, and the global economy was saved by the BRICS countries. At that time, the BRIC was just BRIC, 4 countries, not very big organization, but these emerging countries showed their power to say that, these countries cannot exist and will collapse without US is grossly mistaken. That is the first problem with Mr. Navarro's statement. The second problem, what he said, these countries hate each other and they want to fight each other. That's again ridiculous. I mean, the good thing about the BRICS countries is the leaders of these countries, they meet at least twice a year with each other. That never happened before in the history of emerging countries. When there was a non-aligned movement, they used to meet sometime, but to the BRICS, they have a summit every year, the leaders meet, and they also meet at G20, and they also meet at UN when the UN session is open. whether the foreign ministers or the prime ministers, presidents, they have a meeting. So to say of course, the countries have bilateral problems. They can have even problem of trade surplus or some border conflict, of uncertainty like India and China have. But to say they hate each other and they cannot work together, it is not really true. And we have enough evidence that how these leaders have been meeting. They recently met in China at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, and everybody saw the visuals from there. Prime Minister Modi with Presidents Xi and Putin discussing important matters, bilateral meeting, multilateral meetings, global governance initiative launched by China. So a lot of things are happening in the world, good things are happening in the world. And I think Americans are refusing to see writing on the wall. That's a problem, and this attitude, the unilateral attitude, not believing in multilateralism, creating trade barriers, putting sanctions, mixing non-trade issues with trade issues. That's a big thing. Like in case it's happening in Brazil, the tariffs have been put not because of trade issues. Also against India, the tariffs have been increased to 50%, not because there's a problem between India and US trade, because they say you're buying oil from Russia. I mean, that is not a trade issue between India and Brazil. India and US. And if there are any trade and tariff issues between India and US or any country, it should be taken to WTO. It should be resolved there. WTO was created with the sole purpose of providing a platform to the economies of the world to resolve their issues, to do trade in a balanced and fair manner. So, if you have any problem with India, take India to WTO, but they know that the any case against India will not stand there, or for matter any other country, Brazil or China, any other country. So that's why they're doing this taking unilateral measures, very strong actions, and it certainly is not going for good for global economy, and I'm sure it's also not good for U.S. economy in the long term. We're already seeing the results, the growing inflation, the jobs figures, not really good coming from the U.S. So I think U.S. can face difficulties. Of course, everyone is going to suffer. When there's a disruption in global economy, everyone is going to suffer, no doubt about it. But other countries, they realize it now, and they're trying to find a way out. But the U.S., I'm not sure. They're going down this path, and they're not showing any indication that they want to change course. They want to continue going down this path of, confrontation or unilateral action or disruption in global economy.
Yeah, we don't work that way. That's just not the way the U.S. political system works. It's a hubris. It's a hegemon. And they've internalized that notion of being a hegemon. And so after declaring a trade war against the world, after going after individual countries, trying to pluck them off for one another, well, it's kind of hard to reverse course. I mean, if you remember when Donald Trump started the trade war against China, and the only thing that stopped him, the stock market was dropping 1,000 points every day. It was when the bond market got to the point where the U.S. currency itself started to become in question, where they finally pull back the reins. What they will lack in regards to economic output, they would just make up for with lies. So Trump will come out and say, we have the best economy on the planet, even if the job market tanks. He will try to get his particular guy in to cook the numbers, meaning reality is not going to be the thing that stops the Trump administration in their behavior on this. They think that they can effectively force their will. Also, it is a trade issue from the United States point of view. I know that Donald Trump is talking about Bolsonaro, or he's talking about India trading with Russian oil. That may be true in part, but Donald Trump has also pointed out that his issue is BRICS, and this idea that the dollar would lose, let's say, status and currency in the world as a reserve currency. I mean, you can look at it, you can see it falling. I mean, we had 70% at one point. We're down to 50-something% in regards to the reserve currency. And the more integrated BRICS gets and starts using their own currency, the less used the dollar will be. Trump, of all the political figures, seem to be very clear about that. It seems to be going at these countries as a direct result. Give me your take on that. I mean, do you see it in those terms? Does BRICS see it in those terms, that the U.S. is going directly after BRICS, not just individual states?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the history of global economy in the 50s and 60s and 70s, till 80s, even 90s, the US was the biggest economy in the world, but also the dominant economy in the world. Okay, it was the biggest economy. Number 2 was Japan, but there was a big gap between US and Japan, and then Germany, and Britain and France. But there was a big gap always a big gap in terms of GDP. That is not the story anymore. US is still the biggest economy, but not the dominant economy. The American domination has been challenged by China.
Right.
The US is $30 trillion, China's $20 trillion, just $10 trillion behind. But in terms of economic impact, in terms of manufacturing, export and import, China is now, you can say, the dominant player in global economy. So that is the concern in Washington, because once it comes closer to US or passes US as the biggest economy, there's a fear that China may launch its own international reserve currency or digital currency or something. I think so. The whole effort here is they're trying to protect the dollar as an international reserve currency.
Yes.
And it may just backfire, because the effort to block the process of dis-dollarization may actually accelerate the process for a couple of reasons. For a number of reasons, principally what happened with the Russian reserves, they were stolen in broad daylight, and that caused a lot of concerns around the world. You put your international reserve, foreign exchange in Bank of England or Bank of France or American bank, and suddenly it's gone. So it's not safe anymore. So it's not safe to put your reserves in euro or dollar. That is a big blow. That is a very, very big mistake. And all the countries, countries like India have a foreign exchange reserve of almost $700 billion. Brazil has about $600 billion. It's a huge amount of money. And you of course, you would like to protect it. So that is one reason. Second reason, I think, is more pragmatic, Jamal. I mean, the countries spend a lot of their resources in doing business with each other with dollar. So I think it makes sense for them to try to explore the possibility of not just to give up dollar, but trying to do trade in their own currencies. Not 100%, but some amount of it. It has already happened between Brazil and China, I think more than 20-30%. Between China and Russia, it's this huge percent. But it's not out of choice. I mean, in case of China, it's not out of choice. They were forced to do it because you have blocked all the ways for Russia to do business with other countries. What is the option? So many sanctions. They can't use SWIFT. They can't use international banking system. So Russia had to resort to doing business. For example, with India also, is a national currencies. And I think President Lula has spoken about it a lot of times, that world needs another international reserve currencies. And they are, there's a euro, there's a yen, there are other international currencies. I mean, the biggest challenge to US dollar has come not from BRICS countries. Historically, it has come from Europe. By creating euro, I think, and they gave up dollar for using trade between themselves. It became the reserve currency, international currency of the European Union. But I think the other players, emerging players, would also like to explore the possibility. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but definitely explore the possibility. And as you said, the share of dollar in international trade has been going down over decades. From at one point in time it was 75%. Now it's down to, I think, 50%, something like 50%.
Yeah,
and it may go down further, and it is bound to happen. And many countries in the world, members of BRICS or not, they're exploring the possibility of doing trade between themselves without dollar. For example, two African countries, whatever, Kenya and Rwanda, Kenya and Uganda or whatever. They have to spend a lot of resources to do a trade between themselves in dollar. I mean, maybe African countries would like to explore the possibility of creating their own currency. Why not? because you spend a lot of your own resources in procuring dollars and then sending it to the country. So this is bound to happen. But I think, but this is fair in America, because we have discussed this before. American economy has some very serious crisis.
Mhm.
The foundations of U.S. economy are not very solid. Everybody knows it. The kind of debt they have, $38 trillion, can never be repaid. It can never be repaid. And I think all this, Trump keeps talking about a lot of money coming into U.S. and they'll use this money to repay the debt. I think it's a bit of a fantasy.
It is.
That debt cannot be paid. And so this kind of a convoluted effort to save the dollar may actually accelerate the process of the world going away from dollar and exploring other possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, the moment that you use it as a weapon, it's a rational act to try to get away from the fact that you're using it as a weapon, right? I mean, like, what did they think? Like, they decided to use this thing that gave America this massive benefit and bonus, this advantage over every other country. And their response is, hey, let's use that as a weapon and target other countries with this particular thing that gives us a massive advantage. What did they expect the other countries to do? Just sit there and allow the United States to use it as a weapon? Or is it a rational act? It would be like if you, the moment that you build a nuke, I need to build a nuke, right? The moment that you build some kind of weapon, I need to find a way to counter that weapon. Well, the dollar, if it's used as a weapon, it's the exact same thing. And these lunatics, for whatever particular reason, hubris, incompetence, this idea of their own moral, ethical superiority, assume, well, they're not going to do anything about it. If you remember, it was Joe Biden who turned to the leaders and said, what are you going to do, work together? And it was like, hey, that's a good idea. They start working together.
Yeah.
Is there anything offensive? And I don't mean kinetic, I just mean in an economic sense. Because I get the sense that what Lula wanted was a more muscular response to these tariffs that Trump is effectively applying. Was there anything like that that was, I mean, it's one thing to say we should integrate more. It's another thing to say we should take punitive action. And BRICS, with the scale of their economies, especially all combined, you would think has the capability of applying some level of punitive action and leverage against the US to make it painful. For example, China. You have all of these farmers that are out there praying for God to help them because Trump and the trade war has effectively damaged their capability of maintaining their livelihoods. Okay, that's a consequence, that's a cost that was being applied to the US in a way that the Trump administration maybe could compensate, but at the very least, those farmers are very pissed off at Donald Trump as a direct result of that. I'm saying, I get the sense that Lula wanted something a little bit more offensive, not integration, but what can we do to make this hurt for the US going forward? Did you get any sense of any of that? I mean, I know a lot of this means took place in private, but I'm still curious on if any of that leaked out.
I think it's an ongoing process, and that will continue. This dialogue between the BRICS countries. So one big problem, Jamal, is there's no consistency in U.S. policy. When they started with tariffs against Brazil, it was 10%, then became 25%, and suddenly overnight it became 50%, and for political reasons. And same thing happened with India. They started on a 25%, and it was hiked to 50%. Again, for matters not related to trade. So I think there's a lot of inconsistency. The messaging from Washington, they're playing good cop, bad cop, and trying to threaten countries. And so I think the country is also taking time in absorbing the messages, trying to understand what exactly do they want. For example, we know that at one point, the tariffs against China had been increased to 145%. And suddenly they scaled it back to 50%, and now there's a freeze of 90 days freeze. So I think, that there are a lot of games, it's kind of a game of nerves going on between countries. Of course, there are also discussions happening behind the doors. But what they say in public or what they post on social media is not really helping the cause, because then, this kind of pressure publicly on the countries, I think very few governments will take it lying down. I think they will um, retaliate or do something. And I think this meeting between the BRICS countries is an indication that the countries are thinking about forming a joint front and having solidarity among themselves, not only in terms of retaliation, but I think what the countries are doing now, they are exploring new markets, other markets. Now, for example, I think we just got the figures from about Brazilian trade recently, and the Brazilian exports have increased. They've gone down with the US, but the Brazilian exports to other countries have increased. I think that India is doing the same. India is also exploring new markets. India has recently signed free trade agreements with various countries, including Indonesia, Maldives, European Union. A discussion is going on. So I think the retaliation will be in a different form, because the world is a very big place. We're almost 8 billion people. The US population is less than 5%. If you include European population and US population, it's not even 10% of the world population. So we're talking about 90% of the world. If you want to do trade, of course, the reason countries do trade with the US or European Union because they have a strong currency. That is the attraction. Sell something to US, you get money in dollar. But if you scale up your quantity, for example, and you can sell to all over the world. But so I think slowly and slowly there's a realization around the world that US is not a good trading partner, because if you get threats from a trading partner, sanctions, tariffs, how can you do trade with that country? You would definitely think twice about it. You would definitely explore other markets. And for example, India and China. China has a huge trade surplus with India, huge, almost $70-80 billion. If China opens its market for Indian products, that will help Indian economy a lot. And I think this issue was also discussed, how these BRICS countries can reduce the trade surplus among themselves. That will help the balance out the global economy in a better way. So I think there will be, this discussion will continue. The presidency of the BRICS is with Brazil till December. Then it will be with India, and then with China. So I think the discussion among the BRICS countries will continue, and the countries will act individually, but also collectively to protect their common interests. There's a big chance of that.
Yeah, that's fair. That makes sense. Whether you're acting offensively in regards to some kind of retaliatory sanctions or tariffs, or whether you just react in a way that says, okay, well, let's just stop using the dollar. Let's change our markets. Let's let America try to figure out how to get beef somewhere else. Let's American farmers sell their soy or whatever else somewhere else. If you have 1.4 billion people or 1.5 billion people, and you are selling, your farmers or selling to that country, and then all of a sudden they no longer sell to that country, that is a hell of a market to try to replace. Where do you find 1.4 billion people to sell those things to? And so you can see why those farmers are effectively taking a hit in the way that they're taking a hit. And if the rest of the world start doing that, that's rough. Carl Jha often likes to say that Donald Trump is his president. He lives in Bali. He's like, that's my president. And he says it in this kind of backhanded way because he's talking about this kind of accelerant that Donald Trump seems to be for pushing these countries together, countries that under normal circumstances may not have come together. Brazil is on the other side of the world. South Africa is on the other side of the world from Russia and China. And yet they've come together, this kind of trade bloc. They did that as a direct result of U.S. behavior, not just with Trump. Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah. I hope they come up with a way to impart some kind of cost on the U.S. for doing this. Why? Give me your take on why did I'm saying this poorly. Why didn't the rest of the world come together in this way? Why didn't they say, we're not going to tolerate the U.S. behaving this way? Because the moment we tolerate them behaving this way, it's just going to create worse behavior. and let's lump together and function as a unit. They didn't really do that. I mean, BRICS is trying to do that now, but the rest of the world didn't particularly do that.
Yeah, I mean, Jamal, these systems have been created over decades. This globalization hasn't happened over a year or two. It started for example, reforms in India happened in early 90s, China also in 80s, and then these countries became part of globalization, globalized economy, Brazil also.
Right.
So we're talking about a period of 30, 40 years. And if you want to undo the system all of a sudden, it's just not possible. I think the global economy will just collapse. So I think that's the reason, countries have been cautious in retaliating against the US. And all these countries, barring China, I mean, China retaliated in a strong manner because China has a big economy. Okay.
Yeah.
And they can do it. And when they did it, the US backed off immediately. I think that's the importance of meetings, showing a collective face to the US, the BRICS countries. Okay, we are together. We want fair trade. We don't want trade barriers. We want more growth and development. But I don't think the message has been taken well or in a positive light in Washington. But this, what we are witnessing right now is a disruption in the global economic order, and with the sole purpose of the US wants other countries to make more investment in the US, send their factories to the US. That is the purpose. But I think I heard Professor Richard Wolff on one of the programs, I don't remember where, and he makes a very interesting point. If other countries start doing business with each other, not with US, it will cause deflation around the world and inflation in the US. So it will be counterproductive for the US, because if you have an inflation and deflation in other places, US is thinking of making products in America and selling it to other countries. But when the countries have deflation, they're not going to buy from the US.
Right.
So it will all backfire. As simple as that. So
yeah.
But
he was on the show. He said the same thing. He was making this point of saying, like, if you are going to take the entire reason that you ship, let's say, a factory to China, is because you can make it for cheaper. And if you were doing this in the United States, where you're going to have to pay higher wages, different costs, and everything else, well, they can't buy that from the US. Like, they couldn't afford to buy it anyway. It becomes a moot point. In doing so, only other people who can buy it are Americans. You can't sell that product anywhere else around the globe. No, Richard Wolff is really good with this. Wow. Shobhan, no, please.
No, just I think the American government has to realize this is not such a great demand for American products around the world. For example, if you want to sell American cars, nobody is looking forward to buying American cars anywhere in the world. Because they are gas guzzlers. They consume a lot of gasoline, and now we have better cars, more advanced cars, technologically more advanced cars coming from other countries. So if you think you can make American cars in US and ship it to Japan or Korea or China or India or Brazil, it's not going to happen. America went through a process of type of disindustrialization. They sent manufacturing abroad. And that process was, again, a long process, started in 1970s up till now. And suddenly you want to go back, you want to turn the clock back. It's not going to happen. It's not that easy. It can happen in fantasy land, but in the real world, it's very, very difficult.
What about Lula had been talking very strongly, and he's been saying this for the last several months, about a currency, a BRICS currency. At one point, Putin was pushing this very hard. Any movement on that, or was that just kind of pushed to the side?
Yeah, because if you talk of creating a new currency, there has to be discussion and debate for a long time. I mean, if you think of euro, how many years, decades took them to create a currency? And European countries are more homogeneous. They have a similar population. Not so much difference in the economy. Of course, they have three big economies, but I mean, here we're talking about, for example, China's $20 trillion economy, and Iran is how much? I mean, not even probably $1 trillion economy. So, Brazil is $2 trillion, India is $4 trillion. So there's a big gaps here. to create a common currency. I think they're not talking about common currency. There's a more focus on a currency for doing business among themselves. That is the purpose. That is the thing, but that effectively means giving up on dollar, at least for doing business with among themselves. That is an idea. And as the size of BRICS grows, I mean, it was just 4 countries and became 5, now it's 11, and there are several countries who are like associate members. So you're talking about 25, 30 countries. So if 25, 30 countries use a different kind of mechanism than dollar, is going to be a huge setback to dollar. But I think this is still at the discussion level. It's an aspiration. It's not something concrete, or there's a proposal to do that, because I think a lot of technicalities involved here, not for any other reason. A lot of technicalities involved, and I think as the discussion goes forward over the years, I think maybe they'll find some solution. And the countries are keen. Countries are already doing business in their national currencies for whatever reasons. It's already happening. It's not just an aspiration. Let's see how it evolves over the years, and there's a possibility.
Yeah, it may take care of itself. I mean, they may just find a mechanism for doing. You may not need a common currency in that sense. You may just, I trade in yuan, I trade in, what is the name of the currency? It'll come to me in a moment. Rubles. Basically each country is trading their own currency, and it becomes so normalized that that's just it becomes this kind of formalized process over the course of time, just because of the way that they operate with it. No, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Well, I think what the U.S. is doing is outrageous. I think these countries have every right to respond to it. I think it will backfire, especially with the political integration associated with all of these countries. I mean, for God's sake, when Modi was holding Putin's hand and they walked over to Xi Jinping, sending a message, right? I'm curious, what do you think that message was? And who do you think the message? Well, obviously it was aimed at the U.S. But what do you think the message ultimately was? We don't need you. We don't, you're not indispensable. We have other partners in the world. What do you think Modi was trying to get across in that?
See, I don't know if they were trying to give a deliberate message, but I'm more interested in how the message was received in Washington. And Donald Trump, he tweeted about it, that, we have lost Russia, and that's what he said. I'm paraphrasing. We have lost India and China to the deepest, darkest China, India and Russia to China. Okay. So that's how it was seen in Washington. That the countries there, they're conspiring against the US. This, I don't know what is the foundation of this fear. Countries have reasons to, and they need to build their own alliances based on the common interest. Right. As simple as that. I mean, there would be no BRICS, there would be no SCO if the international order was more balanced, more fair. It is not. They're saying IMF and World Bank and UN, we know how they work. They don't work in favor of emerging countries. So the emerging countries, they needed to make their own platform. There's a reason behind that. So I think countries have they have the right and a reason to make their own collective, their own alliances, to protect their own national interests. As simple as that. And I think that that is too much for Washington to digest, because it has been a hegemon for such a long time. They want every country to work for American interest. I'm afraid that's too much for other countries. Any country to accept that is too much.
Before I close with you, can we hit Venezuela just for 1 second? I am very curious about the relationship between Venezuela and Brazil. I can't imagine that any country in that region is going to be okay with the United States attacking Venezuela. Hegseth, the god of war, alcoholic television personality, just showed up in Puerto Rico, and because they have used Puerto Rico almost as a forward base for whatever kind of threats or machinations that they are coming up with, speaking about conspiring against Maduro's government. I'm curious if any of the countries in the region has, let's say, loudly protested this, Brazil included. especially since Venezuela, while not a member of BRICS, it was close to being one, or it really seemed like it was close to becoming one.
President Lula, in his discourse yesterday, he mentioned Venezuela, and he mentioned that the American Navy is active in the Caribbean, and it's not a good sign because they're trying to basically do is a regime change in Venezuela by creating this threat. So he mentioned it, and I think nobody in the region wants a war. There has not been a war in South America for a very long time, and especially by a foreign power which is far away from here. So they will find support maybe from Javier Milei of Argentina, but he's also in trouble now, very, very deep trouble. There's a corruption scandal rocking his government. There was an election in Buenos Aires just a couple of days ago, and he lost it very, very badly. So his government is now very fragile. And I don't think any country in this region, especially Brazil, Brazil has complicated relations with Maduro government in Venezuela, but that doesn't mean they're going to just stand by and watch an attack on Venezuela, which is not going to happen. This is all posturing. They blew up.
Oh, you don't think so? You think they're bluffing?
They're bluffing, for sure. They're bluffing. It's a show of his strength. Muscle flexing and saying this is our backyard. We can do what they want. I mean, they blew up a boat, and claimed the drug dealers were killed. We don't know who are these people who were killed, right? There's no way to prove it. And Venezuela is not. Venezuela has a good military. They're quite capable of defending themselves. They have F-16s, they have Sukhois, they have S-300 missiles. So I think if there's a war, I think the American fleet is going to suffer big damage, and I don't think American president can afford to suffer huge damage. Just in your backyard. So it's all 50 million reward on Maduro, information Maduro. He's the president of Venezuela. He's in public all the time. Why do you need 50 million reward on information about him? It's hard to understand. Of course, it's an attempt to create uncertainty, destabilize the country, and expect the people to come out on the street or create some kind of anarchy and chaos, like what's seeing in Nepal, a small country. All of a sudden, the country is burning. Because they control social media, the big tech is with them, and they can use big tech to create unrest in the country. But a military invasion of Venezuela, in my opinion, given the circumstances, given the history, and is out of question. Very difficult.
You brought up Nepal. From my understanding, Nepal passed laws against the social media companies because the social media companies weren't adhering to Nepali law. Am I understanding that right?
I think what the Nepali government wanted, they wanted these social media companies to register locally, which is a global practice. If Facebook operates in Brazil or India, they have to create a local office, and they have to adhere by the local laws. Right. But so they made this law, and they asked these countries to do that, and they refused. Nepal is a small country, so they don't really care, But and if you don't follow local law, the government has a right to remove you. So that's what happened in Nepal. But the reaction and how the people have reacted is something really, really concerning. No, people have a right to protest. But burning down Parliament building, burning down the House of Prime Minister, we have seen in this in too many places in recent years, especially in South Asia. It happened in Sri Lanka. Then it happened in Bangladesh. It had happened in another form in Pakistan, and now Nepal. Also, we've seen this happening in Indonesia. A local assembly was burned, and the young people who are kind of use a lot social media, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, principally. So I think you can use social media to create unrest in the country, especially, why these things only happen in developing countries and emerging countries. This kind of burning down, these things don't happen in other parts of the world, thing.
Well,
They've
I'm
tried many
here
times.
in
Iran,
Indonesia. I've watched
Iran-
it take place.
Yeah.
Shocked by the whole thing because it was going from place to place to place. And I guess the question becomes, do you think this stuff is quote unquote organic, or do you think it's astroturf? I mean, it's a hell of a thing for people to come out and burn down a parliament building. That's a pretty major organization feat, right?
Yeah.
Especially over something like the social media thing. It just seems over the top. And it seems like a color revolution tactic, as opposed to just this organic upswell of people who all of a sudden, we're angry and we're going to burn down parliament and burn down people's houses. It just seems outrageous.
Yeah, and it happens so quickly, South Asia has a tradition of a lot of protests, but sit-in protest. You go to parliament, you sit in front of parliament, or go in front of the residence of a leader and sit there and protest, what's called peaceful protest. But now in a matter of 24 hours, people gather on the streets and then they, all hell break loose. You're burning down government buildings. So it's more like not an attack on the government. It's an attack on the state itself, because the parliament doesn't belong to a government. It's a state institutions,
Oh, good point.
So we saw that in Sri Lanka. I mean, government is, corrupt government, inefficient government. Those are other matters, and people have a right to protest. It was burning down presidential palace, looting presidential palace. We saw what happened in Bangladesh, and the prime minister she was almost killed. I mean, so this cannot be organic, and at such a, it's like there's a fuse which is lit, and then it's a sudden explosion, and everything goes down the drain. And invariably they get a government which is pro-US and which it works in interest, not in the interest of their own people, but in interest of other international interests. I mean, Bangladesh, the Muhammad Yunus has been running a government, unelected government, for more than a year, and there's no signal that he's going to go for elections, and he's banning the political party which founded Bangladesh.
Amazing how that happens. Amazing how coincidental that is, right? It's like, whoa, just such a coincidence.
Yeah, so it's that's the world we live in,
Yeah, God, man, Brian Beletic is so right about this. You got to control your information space. Like, it's one thing to have tanks, to have bullets, to have military. You can have all that stuff. If you lose your political space because the population is listening to Facebook and Twitter and US propaganda coming out of YouTube, you're screwed. Like, unless you're going to turn that military on your own population, which in and of itself is a problem, you got to control your information space. It's such a big deal. And what's wild about it is that seems to be what Nepal was trying to do before all of this accelerant effectively took place. So, Shobhan, man, you are fantastic. You have my thanks for coming on and having this conversation with me, especially at the last minute. Shobhan Saxena. He is an Indian journalist based out of Sao Paulo, Brazil, with a career spanning more than 30 years. He has reported for the Times of India, the Hindu, the Indian Express, various other publications in India. Right now, he is international correspondent for DD India, the international channel for India's public broadcaster. You be safe. Enjoy the rest of your day, okay?
Thank you. Thanks. It's a pleasure.
Have a good one, man. Thank you. All right. Shobhan is fantastic. Always appreciate him joining me. The internet signal is a little weird here today. It's been, that's what I said too. 30 years. I read it. It was like, whoa, is that right? Yeah, it's right. It is right. Okay, Karen is going to be on in a moment. I want to show, I'll hit that with her. I want to show Tucker Carlson having a conversation with Mark Cuban. Now, Mark Cuban, billionaire, extraordinarily rich man, money many times more than he could ever spend over the course of his life. Cuban is on stage with Tucker, and you know how Tucker is, right? He has certain feelings about the Ukraine war that doesn't necessarily jive exactly with, let's say, mainstream media. And I suppose Cuban thought he was in a safe space where he was making this point. He was not in a safe space when he was making this point. And Tucker's response is not just on point. He's not just right. He's damn right. And of course, Cuban didn't necessarily have a great response for it, ultimately. If I can find this clip. Here we are. All right. So this is Mark Cuban. Cuban, somehow they got on the subject of Ukraine. Cuban makes the point of saying, well, I have relatives, I have family lineage that went back to Ukraine. So I feel some kind of way about this. And I think we should be sending money as the US government to support this cause. Notice Tucker, ears perk. And this goes downhill from here. This is just fantastic. And by the way, and he's right. And he's entirely, completely correct.
What's your take on whether we should be sending money to Ukraine or not? Were you in favor of that?
Man, they need it.
I mean, honestly, I don't have a good answer. You know, I can make an argument both ways, and half my family is Ukrainian from my grandparents. And so, you know, personally, I think we should help, but I don't have a studied answer for you.
How much money have you sent to Ukraine?
None.
Oh, so what do you mean by we? You're the one whose family's from Ukraine. Like, why don't you send them $1 billion?
Because I'm trying to fix healthcare.
Why don't you fix their healthcare if you're like so deep? If you think we need to help, why don't you start? How about you first? Yeah. I notice that's never like even an option for anybody. It's like, we need to help. That's not what charity is. Forcing other people to help is not charity.
Here's the good vanity. News. The good news is all the weapons were on loan.
And now the host has to come in to try to dissipate the friction that is in the room because Tucker put a knife in him. He's like, the good news is now, and in fact, let me finish this because this is nonsense, by the way.
We're getting it back, and our dear President Trump has negotiated that we own half the minerals, so he turned this horrible tragedy of a war into a profit center, which is one of his unique gifts.
You people are idiots. You people are idiots. Everybody on that stage is an idiot if you think that. How on earth? 2 points. Where are you getting the minerals from? Where are you getting them from? The most mineral-rich part of Ukraine is sitting in the hands of Russia right now. And every day, Russia moves inexorably westward. And if Donald Trump is not going to find some kind of way to end the war, which he probably won't because of his ego, won't necessarily allow him to accept a surrender, the surrender document that the Russians are going to give to him to say, we need you to sign the surrender document, sir. Then they're just going to continuously take more and more and more of Ukraine. Where are you getting the minerals from? How are you going to get them? How are you going to extract them? How long is it going to take for you to extract those minerals? Yes, there are provisions in the contract that Donald Trump effectively sent to the RADA that we are still unaware of what is in those documents in regards to what Ukraine effectively gave up. But if there is no Ukraine, or if much of Ukraine is effectively missing, or if the regions to which Ukraine had that mineral wealth is no longer in the auspices of Ukraine, then you got bupkis. You got bupkis. You're not getting your money back. It's nonsense. You've been sold a bill of goods. Every bit as much. The bill of goods is Europe is going to give us $700 billion for X or Y, something they're not going to do. Japan is going to give us all of this money, something that they're not going to do. None of this stuff is taking place. So it may sound nice as a soundbite that Donald Trump has made a profit off of Ukraine after spending hundreds of billions of dollars in Europe. Nonsense. And Tucker Carlson is right. This war was a fool's errand. We have put money into something of a money pit. For what? And then on top of it, loss. And can't necessarily come to grips with the fact that you lost. Tucker's right. If you feel so strongly about this, suit up, A, or B, you're a billionaire. Give you money. You can support it. You can give, whatever amount of money that you necessarily want to give. Why should we, tax dollars, give our tax dollars to some fool's errand that is taking place in regards to a war purely for the point of geopolitical expansion? The answer is we should not. We should have never gotten involved in that conflict. But you've had a liberal order of neocons in both political parties that thought Russia was Nigeria with snow, with this kind of Hitlerian Western exceptionalism, that made this choice that we can knock over the government of Ukraine, we can expand NATO to the border, And on top of expanding NATO to the border, we can now build up this massive military in Ukraine, unfortunately, full of Nazis. What did you think the Russians were going to do? What would we have done, right? If Warsaw Pact members knocked over Mexico, and in knocking over Mexico, build up this massive military with all of this military equipment from the Warsaw Pact countries, and had them, putting in intelligence, putting in their special services, had these guys talking about taking back Texas or whatever. What would the United States have done in that situation? And considering we've already had a Cuban Missile Crisis, you would think that if you had two honest brain cells that rub together, you would come to the conclusion that the United States would have reacted even more strongly than the way the Russians responded. They are dealing with their internal or matters of security. We would have done the same. That is just being honest. So Cuban, who's sitting there effectively saying that the United States, billionaire Cuban, should be given all of this money to you, he's out of his mind. Tucker is right to put a knife in him on stage. And as you can see, Tucker can't even keep it together. He's like laughing his ass off as he's doing so. He's having a great time. I want to play this one more time. Look, the expression on his face is priceless.
Can I ask you a question? What's your take on whether we should be sending money to Ukraine or not? Were you in favor of that?
Man, they need it.
I mean, honestly, I don't have a good answer.
You don't have a good answer. What do you mean you don't have a good answer? Yes or no?
I can make an argument both ways, and half my family is Ukrainian from my grandparents, and so personally, I think we should help, but I don't have.
And that's the other thing about these flag wavers. These people get out here and say, we support Ukraine. We care so much about Ukraine. You'll see them on these liberal idiots on social media all the time, on Twitter, on YouTube, Facebook, all of these places. And they would always put the flag icon of Ukraine in their little handle. And they would say, we should support Ukraine. We need to stand by Ukraine. We need to fight for the Russians. It's like, dude, they've lost 1.7 million people. And you are still saying they should fight to the last dead Ukrainian, as if that is somehow in Ukraine's best interest. What would have been in Ukraine's best interest? It would have allowed the Istanbul agreements, to allow the Minsk agreements, these agreements that were already there, that would have effectively stopped the war from happening in one sense, ended it in another. But the West didn't want to do that. And so they come up with all of this propaganda. Russia just wants to take over all of Europe. Russia wants to take over all of Ukraine. Russia wants to take over the world. Russia is doing everything. He's invading our French politics. Russia is responsible for, Francois, Sacre Bleu, for failing in regards to the French government. They have this mythos of God-man Putin that they add into pretty much everything. The reality of it is Minsk agreements 1 and 2, Istanbul agreements, the West killed all of those agreements. If you wanted to help and be a benefit to Ukraine, having 1.7 million people dead, not to mention the number of people that effectively are broken, decapitated, and wounded for the rest of their life, is not a positive outcome. Having them lose, 25% of their territory is not a positive outcome. None of these things are positive outcomes. I don't care about your ideology. I care about what's happening in real world physical matter reality. And your flag waving that they should keep fighting to the last dead Ukrainian under no circumstances is to the benefit of Ukraine. I want to bring in our guest. I just heard her pop in. We are joined, and I'm going to nail this name the first time around. Karen, welcome to the show. How you doing this morning? You doing okay?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski.
Kwiatkowski.
Close.
Kwiatkowski.
Damn it. Kwiatkowski, thank you. She's retired U.S. Air Force officer whose assignments included duties as a Pentagon desk officer and various roles for the National Security Agency. She's the author of several books, including African Crisis Response Initiative, Past, Present, and Future, and Expeditionary Air Operations in Africa, The Challenge and Solutions. Karen, thank you for joining me this morning. You doing all right?
I am. Thanks for having me.
No, always. I'm happy to have you. It's funny. I was covering Ukraine and the clip from Tucker Carlson putting a knife in Mark Cuban. One of the interesting things that just broke from Ukraine was, I guess, twofold. One, Russia sent 820 drones, not to mention missiles, in order to hit precision targets that were in Kiev. 2, these attacks have increased with attacks on the oil field, even an attack on a bridge. And you even get this kind of weird political chaos with the foreign minister effectively fleeing out the country. Right here, just to show the headline of the article that just came out. Initially, he said he was going to fight with shovels. And now he's effectively fleeing the country like a thief in the night. This is, of course, Kobela. He is now in Poland, saying that he was concerned that a law was going to come into fruition that was going to trap him in the country, and he feared for his life.
Yeah.
I am trying to make the argument to the public that this war is a fool's errand, and the continuation of this war is only to the detriment of Ukraine. Give me your take on this. I mean, are you surprised that there hasn't been more political chaos in the country at this point?
Yeah, in Ukraine, more
Yes.
political chaos in Ukraine. Yeah. Well, a little bit surprised, but I think from the very beginning, we've kind of understood this war was, never going to end the way the West and NATO had wanted it. And also, we don't report and we don't talk about who started this war.
Right.
The eastward expansion of NATO, contrary to many both written and spoken promises by heads of state, by key leaders, treaties that were defiled and purposely ignored, like the Minsk 1 and 2, that we found out years later, the public found out years later, that those treaties were just signed to buy time for Ukraine to go ahead and someday soon start a war with Russia. And then, of course, the hypocrisy of it was that realistically, small Ukraine, even with NATO's help, even with the United States' help, was never going to win a land battle of any type or an air war, and certainly not a naval war against Russia. They were never going to win. And the Western leaders, particularly Biden's people, the neocons in Washington, who really wanted this for decades, knew that. They knew that they would lose. They knew Ukraine would suffer. And we've got the famous words of the South Carolina senator who said, the Ukrainians dying to kill Russians. This is, or our money spent to kill Russians in Ukraine at no cost to American lives is the best investment we've made, the best money we've ever spent. And he's publicly, Lindsey Graham has said this publicly, but this also reflects the thinking of the neocons in Washington and the neocons and warmongers in NATO. They see Ukraine as a sacrificial lamb. And it's one thing to say, well, 3.5 years into this, yeah, clearly they were a sacrificial lamb. Clearly Ukraine has been destroyed and has suffered great losses, both of territory and people and economy and infrastructure. Clearly that's happened. We say that now, the public says that now, we can see it. This is what Washington said from day one. They were intended to die for Western objectives, which were, as Rand Corporation has written publicly, to weaken, to
overextend
Russia, to cause Russia to have its own Vietnam, something like that. This kind of thinking is not what American people think. It's not how we think, but it is how Washington thinks. And this is played out precisely as you would have expected, as I would have expected. And the people that are not expecting it, the people that are surprised, I think in some cases are the Ukrainians themselves. They were told, you go do this thing. You're the vanguard against this evil Russian empire, which there is no evil Russian empire. It's not an empire. It's not evil. But Ukrainians were told, you're the vanguard and we will back you up. We will help you. And guess what? We've never lost a war, which is, of course, a lie. But we will make this a success for you, and you will be better, stronger, faster than you ever were before. This is what the West told Ukraine. So, and a lot of Ukrainians obviously left the country. Okay. Yes. A number of Russian-speaking Ukrainians voted to join Russia, where they wouldn't be bombed every day by Kiev, which is what had been happening since 2014. But Ukrainians have been used and abused here, and we have been doing it. Now, is Russia ramping up their conclusion of the war? Are they now targeting political targets to some extent? Leadership, infrastructure. I think they're going to go there, but they're not quite. They haven't. They've held back. But
yeah,
this is it's so easy to see in retrospect, and yet many voices were and logical people could have looked at this 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and said, this is where this is going to end.
Syrsky, Ukrainian commander, has come out and pointed out the enemy has threefold advantage in force and means and can prevail 4 to 6 times. He apparently wrote this on Telegram. And yet they're still plugging away. It's just amazing to me. They're still plugging away.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's the Ukrainians in Ukraine. I mean, people fight. People fight. If you've decided, if you haven't left Ukraine yet, you're probably there to fight, I think. And there's a lot of the power of, when countries go to war, it's a great unifying thing for the people in that. This is how Bush got us into, after 9/11, right? We're going to go kick somebody's butt. We're going to get Afghanistan, right? They didn't have anything to do with it, but it didn't matter because we'd been attacked, quote unquote, on 9/11. And that unified people to go want to fight. And there's a number of people who joined the military, never had any intention of ever joining the military. After 9/11, they did that. And so this is the power of state propaganda. It's a power of kind of a war, a lust for war, a sense of justice of some sort that the state can promote. And I'm sure, Ukraine, and particularly I guess we're not neo-Nazis, whatever they are, Ukraine far-right nationalists who despise Russia and celebrate aspects of the Nazi regime. Okay, this is who they are. And they have stayed to fight, and their propaganda is very different than what we're talking about. This is existential, so there will be people that fight. And of course, one of the objectives of the operation that Russia launched almost 4 years ago was to eliminate the Nazi influences in Ukraine. They stated that. Now, we in the West, we say, what Nazi influences? I mean, we wouldn't know a Nazi symbol if we, had it in Washington, we wouldn't even recognize it. But Russia said they were going to deal with that aspect. And this is one thing the West never talks about. We don't recognize that, but those guys are on the chopping block right now. And Russia, since we haven't done anything to ameliorate that political excess, if you want to call it, Russia's going to take care of that. And how are they going to take care of it? Well, they might be killing people. They might be killing people. This is what war looks like. It's sad.
Karen, that's a hell of a euphemism. Political excess. Like the Nazis were only political excess. No, you're absolutely right. You're 1,000% right. It's like there are no Nazis in Ukraine. But months beforehand, you had article after article after article about flag burning ceremonies. You had Democrats writing memos saying, hey, we need to do something about the Nazis in Ukraine. And then immediately when the war starts, there are no Nazis in Ukraine. They're just, they're lovable human beings riding through Kursk with swastikas on German tanks. That's all. It's just, it's like, what do you mean Nazis? It's amazing to me. What do you make of this new Pentagon, quote unquote, plan that they've brought out that's apparently going to Hegseth's desk? And the plan is effectively saying, look, we need to withdraw from Russia and China. We need to focus on the homeland. And I've had different points of view on this, of people giving their take on this from different parts of the world, from China and even from Russia itself. You were in the military and you were in the Pentagon. I'm curious on your take on this.
Well, what kind of focused this for me is, the Venezuela. The activity that we're doing, supposedly fighting drug. Well, everybody knows it's about oil. It's about some sort of Trump re-envisioned Monroe Doctrine on steroids, something like that. But the interesting part of that, not talking about China or Russia, but maybe China a little bit, is that the most pro-China guy, number 3 in the Pentagon, his name is he had a hard time getting confirmed, actually.
Eldridge Colby,
Colby, the grandson of a former CIA director. But he was a very big China hawk and not a Russia hawk and not a pro-European guy. He thought, his whole claim to fame, his image was very much, China's our big adversary. We need to orient towards China. Of course, neocons said that. A lot of folks in Washington agree with that. And he was a leader of that. But yet he is the guy that is saying, well, no, actually, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to focus on the hemisphere. We're going to focus on North and South America, which, and I'll tell you, I like it. I like it because, we can't have peace unless we have another war, right? Can't end one war without starting another one. So now we're messing around in our hemisphere, particularly in Venezuela. It makes sense to Americans. We already called it the Gulf of America. Now we're going to extend it down to the oil fields of Venezuela. But if Pentagon can cut the knees off or cut the legs off below the knees of the pro-China hawks who want to fight for Taiwan and turn Taiwan into another Ukraine, which we can tell you right now what the end with that will be, much as it is for Ukraine, except it could be nuclear. So obviously that's not smart for the United States. We have a military that capabilities do not match the budget, $1 trillion plus who knows how much for the intel community. And we can't predict a thing and we can't win a war. We can't we can't produce weapons in the tens of thousands. We count our weapons in triple digits. Yeah, we made 900 this month, of munitions that you need 1,000 a day just to maintain the battlefront. So we can't produce, we can't make. Our equipment technology is very slow to come to market. It's highly expensive. Nobody can afford it. And it doesn't work as advertised. So this is a big problem for us going up against China. It's not a big problem if you're going up against, somebody in your backyard that has an army and a small navy and they fly in Venezuela. They fly the F-16s that we sold them in the 80s. So that's an old aircraft right now. Not a bad aircraft, but it's older. So this is in our lane. Now we are staying in our lane. And if they can, and here's the other thing that I know I'm not making sense here, but the other thing that Trump is good at, and I don't know if it's the art of making a deal, but he recognizes when something's lost. And I like about Trump the way he left the Red Sea, right? Remember we sent a big thing, we're going to free up shipping for everybody. And then it was, well, we're just going to free it up for Israel. And then we just declare victory and go home. And why did we do that? Because it was very expensive and very ineffective. Our military, our Navy in particular, in that environment was just not a match. There's no way the Houthis could continue on forever. And we would continue to pour money into the water, which is what we were doing. And so Trump was able or willing, because he's the way his mind works, he says all kinds of things, right? So he called it a victory. We won. We beat the Houthis. We showed them, and then we left. And I think Colby, Eldridge Colby, and others, and Trump are recognizing that there's not going to be a military confrontation with China, because if there is, we're going to lose about 6 aircraft carriers in 2 days. And then it's going to go nuclear. And that what does that do for Trump's Peace Prize? What does it do for his legacy, right? Nothing. And he knows that. So, and plus we don't have the money for it. It's not just the industrial base that Trump wants to re-energize. We have so many trillions of debt that other countries don't even find our dollar attractive anymore. And they don't trust us. They don't trust our leadership. They don't trust Trump. So we're not in any position to start a big war. So Colby comes up, and the Trump people, I assume, okay, let's pull back. We're going to have a war, all right. It's going to be one we can win in Nicaragua, a drug war. And now all of a sudden China and defending Taiwan are off the table. And anybody who complains about that in Washington, and there will be many, because that was the reason they wanted China and to save Taiwan or whatever, is to keep the gravy train going in Washington for the defense industrial complex. They make so much money when we are at war and preparing to go at war. So I think they've gutted the standing foreign policy of this country that has been this way, really a continuation from 30, 40 years ago, this great power conflict. I think he's ended it. And he ended it in a typically Trump way. He declared victory. We've won. you know, you remember his little, they had the big meeting in China with India. Modi was there, Putin was there, of course, the Chinese leader. And he sent a snarky little, he posted something snarky on Truth Social and X and everything. And he's like, oh, enjoy your little conspiracy or whatever. And it's, I don't know, that's not what he said. He said something,
It's like you're conspiring against America. It's like, I hope you think of America when you're having your
and
your parade or something like that.
That is so, I almost want to say that's so gay. It's terrible. But that is so, you know, that is so something spoken over martinis at a bar, right? You're looking at another group that's shot you a dirty look and so, well, you just go be you, right? I'm going to be me. And it's so Trump. It's smart. It's smart because he doesn't care what people think about him, right? He doesn't care if somebody thinks he's weak.
You're president of the U.S. and you're sending these like snarky comments at a World War II ceremony, a victory. It's like,
oh yeah,
nobody thanked America for the contribution. I hope you threw that while you're conspiring against us. It's like, okay, dude, are you serious right now?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and the way Trump is doing it is also similar to the European view. You know, Europe has totally discounted the role of China and Russia. I think I think it's the head of the I forget, Callis or somebody.
Oh, Callis.
She's been saying a lot of crazy things.
She's so adorable. Oh, yeah. She's so adorable. Yeah,
she's adorable. Yes, bless her heart. But she you know, is talking about China didn't fight in World War II. What did Russia do? And it's like, for Europeans to say that is really, well, the Chinese, I think, said she was poorly educated. And you know, she clearly, I don't know if she knows what she's saying or she's just thinks that this makes sense to her now. But it's very wrong. And I think, so Europe and America, we're kind of like withdrawing into our own little circle of ignorance, which is fine. It's fine for us to do that. It will be safer for the world if we will focus on ourselves. And obviously this is good manners, right? I mean, you know, it's all comes down to really just good manners. Trump doesn't have good manners, but effectively, because he can very easily, I think better than other people, he can assess where can I win and where am I going to have to call it a win because I'm going to lose. And so he called Red Sea a win. It was a loss. He called it a win. He pulled out. China, I mean, look, one look at that military parade. Trump called for a military parade a couple months ago. I don't know how many people watched that thing, but that was insane.
So sad.
That was very sad. And Trump, we were just watching bits and pieces on the television. You know, we didn't dedicate hours of planning and sitting there at you know, an alert stance for 2 hours watching these guys. Trump invested in that, and he saw what his money bought him. Okay, it bought him an embarrassment. Really, it's just not, and particularly for Trump, you know, to have to see that, because Trump likes the show. He's all about the show, and that show sucked. I mean, that was bad. That was bad, and not only was it bad, but it was hyped, and everybody watched it, and everybody drew the same conclusion. That's really bad. If that's what America has, we're in trouble. So and then he sees the Chinese parade. And of course, he's probably watched the North Korean parades too. Quite well orchestrated, very, very well done, very impressive. And he probably watched Putin's parade, which they had in Moscow. That's very nice also. And he knows Trump can make an assessment. You know, he will drop a bad investment quickly. He will drop a friend that screws him over quickly. Look how, you know, Elon Musk almost gave him as much as Marian Adelson did, right? He didn't drop Marian Adelson. We don't know why. I think it's blackmail. But he dropped Trump. I mean, he dropped Musk. Trump dropped Musk very quickly. And Musk probably got him elected more than Miriam did, you know, because you got a lot of independents and a lot of non-voters who, once Musk became excited, he was a spectacle to watch. And that was free advertisement and a lot of money, you know, millions of dollars that Musk gave him. And then Musk questioned something that Trump didn't like, cut him off so quick. That's Trump. He can make a decision rapidly, which is bad in a nuclear age, dangerous in a nuclear age. But I think he's assessing things. I think he sees that we're going to get really slapped badly if we don't get back in our lane and focus on something that helps America. And if that's the case, I don't know. I like it.
If that's true, well, two things. One, Kayla's wrote a book.
What's
and
that?
I am thinking about Kayla's. She actually wrote a book.
Yes.
She actually sat down and wrote a book.
Oh.
I am thinking about getting that book and just reading it to my audience. This is an aside. I worked with a woman once who wrote this book, and my ex, very jealous, even though this is literally just a coworker. She bought the book out of curiosity, and the things that were in that book were amazing. And I remember she was reading me the book. She speaks German. She's like Austrian.
Uh-huh.
And then she's reading the book with an accent. It is pretty wild when you hear this kind of world that people create in those books. I am super curious about what is in that book, especially with the things that Kayla says openly and just with infinite confidence. The Russians are good. They're bad at technology, but the Chinese are good at technology, and they're working together. And it's like, oh God, why do you have a mic? Why do you have a mic? The other point, if that's true, that Donald Trump can let stuff go,
mm-hmm.
why hasn't he walked away from the Ukraine war?
Well,
he could walk.
He could walk away. I think that the reason we're seeing such hysteria in Europe, especially amongst the anti-Russian parts of Europe in the EU, is because he is walking away. I think he is. I think they were shocked at the first 3 months when things were frozen. He was examining everything. And there's two reasons we're walking away from Europe. One is particularly Ukraine. Ukraine is a suckhole of weaponry, okay, that we have to pay for. Somebody has to pay for it. Somebody has to build it. There's a long lead time. And we don't do that very fast in this country. We don't produce massive amounts of munitions. And that's the way this war is being fought. So we can't deliver anyway. So even if it was a different president, even if it was Harris, let's say Harris was the president, the Pentagon, her Pentagon person, her Department of War person would tell her, Mrs. President, we cannot deliver to Ukraine. So you're going to have to figure out some way to tell Europeans that we don't have enough stuff. So I think they're really facing reality in that respect. And Europe knows this. Europe recognizes this, and they're panicking. But yeah, he is withdrawing from Europe. I think that's if you ask Europeans, I think that they believe that. And I think it's true.
Fair enough. But what Donald Trump has decided was to make this a business deal.
Well,
and it doesn't seem like, I agree with you, it's an industrial war.
Yeah.
1000% agreed. And America is trying to supply multiple wars all across the globe, whether it's giving weapons to Taiwan, giving weapons to Israel, and giving weapons to Ukraine in this case.
Yeah.
But he didn't pull back the weapons from Ukraine in essence. He just decided to let Europe buy them. Well, he's trying to get Europe to spend like hundreds of billions of dollars to effectively buy weapons from the US with a 10% markup on top of it.
Right. And Europe agreed to that, even though their own economies collectively cannot afford that. So to me, and I have to say, maybe I'm just nuts. I read too much into, I don't really understand. Maybe that's what it is. But when I saw that deal that he cut, not just the economic deal, but the military deal in particular, we're going to produce all this stuff and you're going to buy it, and you're going to buy it from us, even though we're building you stuff that technology is 15, 20 years old, but and it's very expensive. And the F-15 only flies 33% of the time if you're lucky. But we're going to make you buy all this stuff, and you're going to pay a premium, and you're not going to outsource anything. You're going to buy it from us. And and it's over the next 5 or 10 years. I'm like, first off, Trump ain't going to be here in 5 or 10 years. We know that as president. But to me, that was kind of like how credit card companies do people that don't have jobs. Sure, here's a nice credit card, and as soon as you make a few payments, we're going to raise your limit. But ultimately, the credit card company, credit analysts, the system that looks at their buyers, they've written off these particular credit card users. They know that a big percentage of their lower income customers are going to be write-offs. Okay, which is partly why they keep their credit rating low. But they keep their limits low. But I saw that. This deal is almost like a fantasy deal from Trump's perspective. And I think that's how Trump plays a lot of things. You know, he sells casinos that don't exist, right? He builds hotels. He sells hotels that were nothing but swampland or you know, a waste facility. And he sells the bankers what he's going to make in 2 or 3 or 4 years. And sometimes he does it. And sometimes he doesn't do it. And how many times has he gone bankrupt and been bailed out, which is another problem for our foreign policy. He's been bailed out by the wrong people. But again, to me, this is another deal. Trump cuts a deal, and he doesn't really care 4 years down the road who's going to sit and count. Oh, wait a minute. They actually didn't buy those weapons that they said. And who can predict? I mean, the governments of European countries, many of them are in turmoil. I think the French parliament for the 5th time in 2 years has collapsed or something. You know, there's a lot of people, voters in European countries who are tired of the debt. They realize that the more debt they have, the less Social Security they get, the less health care they get. They realize that, much as I think we do. But they realize it, I think, more acutely than we do. And so they don't like these governments that are making war. And plus, Europe, what is it? It's an old society, demographically very old of Europeans. They have young immigrants. Neither the old European stock or the younger immigrants are going to fight a war for you. Okay? Hey, that's not going to happen. So European countries know they can't afford war. They don't want war. They're not going to pay for war. So in that context, what kind of deal was Trump cutting for himself? The future of Europe is either going to be losing a war drastically or deciding to go a different route, which is peace or neutrality. They don't have the money to do it. He knows it. They know it. Everybody knows it. And what does he do? He inks a deal because that's what Trump does. And he calls it a victory. Oh, this is going to be great. But none of the players are going to be here even in a few years to go back and say, wait a minute, you said you were going to do this. Oh, well, things have changed, right? I'm either rich or I'm a bankrupt. This is Trump's approach. And it's not necessarily good foreign policy or diplomacy or anything like that. But it is what we have. And Trump does realize that our country, the United States of America, filled with all of our great people, is suffering. And we are not robust, okay? We have big, big problems, and we have this terrible debt, and we're becoming increasingly unpopular in the world. So guess what? Trump knows this. He's not stupid. I think he's bringing us in, and it's a slow process because he is going counter to the traditions of Washington, D.C. since 1940s, right? Which has been outward, onward empire. So anyway, I don't know. There's a little bit of hope there. However, I discount everything that I just said because he's still supporting the genocide. Okay. So,
which is what I wanted to get to also, by the way. You and I have a very different take on Trump, but that's perfectly okay. I have several guests that have a much, I say, hopeful take on Trump than I do.
Yeah.
Fair enough. That is perfectly fine. I love the optimism on this. We'll see. And because I could be entirely wrong. He may be trying to pull away. This estimate or the security assessment may become a norm in regards to he's trying to push. Oh God, he's going to get all sorts of pushback. But he may try to, this may be Hegseth, Vance.
You don't know.
And Trump coming together saying this is what we want to do going forward. But we'll see. The Gaza thing is the last thing I wanted to hit you with. So Donald Trump has put out a quote unquote proposal. And in that proposal, Drop Site News was able to get their hands on it. Mm-hmm. It says all hostages, alive or deceased, will be released within 48 hours of signing. Numbers consistent with previous releases. Palestinian prisoners sentenced to life and detainees from Gaza will be released within 48 hours. A ceasefire will go into effect upon implementation for a period of 60 days or until negotiations are concluded. President Trump will, quote, guarantee that the parties negotiate in good faith until an agreement is reached, unquote. If I'm being honest with you, we could stop right there and turn this up. This is a moot point, but I'll keep going. The issue of the negotiations or the negotiated include definition of Hamas, the definition of disarmament, the formation of a new government, the withdrawal of Israeli forces upon formation of the government, or upon successful conclusion of negotiations and amnesty for Hamas members, open flow of aid into Gaza upon implementation of the agreement. Drop Site has a copy of this. that they have in Arabic. Give me a take. I think you're more hopeful about Trump than I am. I think he's a habitual liar.
Yeah.
And so the idea that the United States is going to be the guarantee of anything associated with Israel seems to be absurd to me.
I agree.
But maybe you have a different take on this.
No, not on Israel. Israel's first off, if we wanted to stop weapons delivery to Israel in advance of this, because Israel has its own weapons. Mainly they do come from us, but they have their own. They could continue to fight for a short period of time without our weapons. If he wanted to predicate all of this on we're stopping the export and sale and military assistance and intelligence assistance, we're stopping all that to Israel now in advance to set the stage for some sort of agreement, then I would say, well, yeah, because Israel does care about those weapons that we provide them. That saves them a lot of money, and it allows them to do what they're doing, what they've been doing for almost 2 years, everywhere, not just in Gaza, but the West Bank and Lebanon, Syria, everywhere that they're fighting. If he did not say that, then he's not guaranteeing Israel is going to do anything. Second off, not only does Trump lie and say, I'm going to do this and that, we've seen this repeatedly, so does Netanyahu, except Netanyahu does it even more predictably than Trump does. So if Netanyahu said, oh yeah, that sounds good, we'll do that. No, he's not going to do that. Nobody in the region, nobody in the planet trusts the Netanyahu government, the regime that he is beholden to in the Knesset. Nobody trusts them any farther than you can throw them, push them, put a tiny bit of pressure on. You do not trust them. They have an agenda, which they have made very clear, that they're taking Gaza, they're destroying Gaza, which they have actually mostly done, and they're going to exit or exterminate the Gazans who remain. They are also doing the same thing in the West Bank. They have said it. They have done it. It's been reported globally. Nothing has changed. So Trump is smoking something in the sense that he thinks he can ensure something he can't. Not unless he's going to stop weapons and then send an expeditionary force to make sure that the IDF is not shooting Gazans and blowing up buildings after they said they wouldn't. Now, the other thing that's shocking to me is amnesty. I haven't seen this report, but you said amnesty for Hamas, for certain Hamas members.
This was, let me see, I'll show. Dropsite has been doing a really good job covering pretty much any and everything that's been taking place in Gaza. And they have connections with some of the Hamas members, like leadership, where they've been having a conversation with. And apparently one of the items, where is it? The issue that we negotiated, an amnesty for Hamas membership. Yeah.
Yep. And a formulation of a government that Gazans choose, perhaps with help of outside communities. None of that is not going to fly with Netanyahu. It's not going to fly with Netanyahu's people
it is not.
at all. No, and it's not even going to fly with 80% of the Israelis who support Netanyahu in this genocide. Now, they don't like that people are being killed. Some of those Israelis like, well, I'm tired of war. I want my soldiers, I want my hostages back. They're prisoners of war back, But they do not agree. They are, the success of the propaganda in Israel, the Zionist propaganda, that all Arabs hate you and all Hamas wants to do is destroy everything that you have and all of your people and your children, pretty much like what Israel is doing in Gaza. But they believe that. So there is no way on God's earth that the current Israeli regime would accept amnesty for Hamas, which has been made out to be the devil. I mean, the devil incarnate, particularly since October 7th. I mean, Hamas being evil, and a terrible, massive evil threat that must be eliminated. How do you go from that for 2 years or for 25 years? How do you go from that to, we'll give them amnesty? Yeah. That's a big jump. I don't see that. So it looks like I don't know. Well, who's negotiating it? Is this another Witkoff thing?
I know Witkoff had been negotiating, and even some of these cases walked out of the meeting. I mean, it's been clear at this point. Every deal that Witkoff has come up with, Netanyahu has killed the deal. Hamas is in a position where they are desperate, and they've been willing to accept pretty much anything.
That's right.
But in this case, Netanyahu has always found a way to effectively kill the deal. Donald Trump has to know that.
Yeah.
I guess I don't have this rosy view of him in this.
No,
I think he's a insincere actor. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Well, in Gaza, that is, I'm with you 100% in Gaza. So that's why my theories about him in other areas, about like who he is as a person and whatnot, how he thinks, it is all discounted. It is probably overly hopeful, because when I look at Gaza, nobody could be that ignorant. Nobody could be as ignorant as Trump on Gaza. Right. I mean, he has the access of every bit of intelligence that the planet has if he wants it. How could he be so ignorant? So I think he's totally corrupted and bought off. But I will say this, and this is another point of light, has nothing to do with the U.S. But, you know, the UAE told Israel that if they continue to try to take over the West Bank and consolidate the West Bank, they said, they told Israel and Washington, they said, this Abraham Accords thing is off. And we're not doing it. And as the UAE will go, the rest of the Arab community that's part of the Abraham Accords will follow. And that caused the Knesset, that caused Netanyahu to stop and think, because all of the world hates Israel, right? We're not going to ever, most people who are aware of this and work for companies, we're never buying another Israeli product as long as we live. We're not boycotting them. We're just not going to buy their stuff, right? I mean, you can say, oh, you're part of a movement. No, we're not part of a movement. We're not buying their stuff, right? And we're not going to support our congressman taking AIPAC money, and we're not going to support wars for Israel. That's 30 years of indoctrination here that we're turning the corner on. So Israel needs friends, right? And the best friends you need are the ones close to you. That's their community, the Arab world. So the Arab world has a lot more, the Arab governments, even though they're all compromised in different ways by their own problems, by the U.S. money, all different things. But when the UAE said stop on the West Bank, Netanyahu sat up and listened to that. When the United States tells Netanyahu to stop doing something, he smiles and pats him on the head and does exactly what he damn well pleases. So I thought that was something good. And maybe the Arab countries can recognize they do have power to deal with what is it, West Jerusalem. They have power to deal with Tel Aviv. They can do it. So I don't know, but I just pray every day that enough Gazans and Palestinians survive and can regain their health that has been taken from them, that they are still a power and a force to be reckoned with, because Gazan land is their land. In fact, Palestine is their country. So I'm sorry. I root for them. And guess what? When I say that, that's the majority global opinion.
Yes.
That counts for something. It counts for something.
It is deeply hurtful that our government is doing this. It's shameful. And I'll just say it's shameful. Karen, you're fantastic. Thank you for this. You really are. Karen Kwiatkowski.
Yes. That's good.
Yes, good. She is retired U.S. Air Force officer whose assignments included duties as a Pentagon desk officer in various roles for the National Security Agency. She's author of several books, including African Crisis Response Initiative, Past, Present, and Future, and Expeditionary Air Operations in Africa, Challenges and Solutions. Thank you for this. You have a good day, okay? Be safe.
Okay, you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, Karen is fantastic. And she's right. On that one, she's perfectly right. There's nothing else to add to it. She's perfectly right. I do see some of the dirty people in the chat lusting after Karen. You guys are horrible. But fair enough. She's a great guest, and I definitely appreciate her for joining me. Let's go to the chat real quick. Let's see. We have World Politics Channel, listening while working. Love your show, man. Well, thank you, World Politics Channel. Shout out to you. Thanks for that. And we have Kevin Wayne. I have a 2-part blog post in response to history behind the Crimean reunion with Russia. Lots of research. We'll send it. Please do. Please do, Kevin. Thank you for that. Absolutely. Thank you for that. We have a bunch of weirdos. Frank Friel, let's see. Jamal, have you heard about what's this? AZAPACT? It's a lobbyist group against AIPAC. I don't know how legit it is. but I like the idea. I do like the idea also. Yeah, I guess we have to see how legit it is. It's like, I would prefer AIPAC just gets called a FARA, a foreign agent, which is what they are, and treated accordingly as a foreign agent. The notion that you could put this much money when you have one very specific political objective, and that's the objective of another country being your priority, is outrageous. And then to not get called a political entity or a foreign agent is, again, outrageous. Outrageous. I'm an old dude, no weirdo. I didn't call you a weirdo. I didn't call you a weirdo. Some people are like older women. That's perfectly fine. No shade, no criticism, no none of that stuff. None of that. I back your right, Jonathan. Back your right, Jonathan. All right, what time is it? Oh, one more thing before we close. Got to be honest, my powers are kind of dragging right now, but it's okay. Let's finish this out. Oh, for fuck's sake. Chairman of the Hamas Political Bureau, Khaled Mashal, has reportedly been killed. A senior Hamas official told Al Jazeera that the movement's negotiating team was attacked during a meeting in Doha, Qatar, while discussing the ceasefire idea put forward by Trump. So apparently it was set up. This wouldn't be the first time the Trump administration lured someone into talks only to be murdered. Only to be murdered. Soleimani, if you remember, was lured into talks only to be murdered. This seems to be Donald Trump's MO at this point. Yeah. So when I tell Karen I have a very different view of Donald Trump, I think he's a degenerate sociopath, a child with a gun. That's my point of view of Donald Trump. That point of view is informed based on the things that Donald Trump does. I don't believe for a moment that Donald Trump was pulling back from the world. I think he's trying to have primacy on the cheap, where he's using other governments in other countries in order to effectively affect the political will of the United States to die for the dignity of America, like he's doing with those idiots. Let's say some countries in Asia, Israel, or for that matter, Europe, that is going to effectively be a sponge for a bunch of Russian missiles. Die for the dignity of America, effectively feeding Europeans to the Russians. There's another story, if I can find it. If I can find it. Where is it? Oh, it has been released that that book did come from Donald Trump, where he drew that woman with the suggestive information about Epstein, effectively pointing out we have a secret in common. It's like, oh, is that secret that you have sex with children? That's where I immediately go with that notion. I don't know if Donald Trump is being blackmailed, if he's just a sociopath or what. I don't think it ultimately matters. It all boils down to the exact same thing. All right, I'll hold this story. And I'll hold this for tomorrow with my guests. Because for whatever particular reason, I can't find the one I was looking for. All right. I'm going to call this a day. We have hit all of our stories. We've had all of our guests. I need to figure out what is going on with the signal here. Sometimes when it rains, it screws with the signal. It's like, I don't know what it is, slows it down or something. I'm not quite sure what it is. But it's been pouring down, raining for the last several hours. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. FBI informant my ass. I'm more inclined to believe that he's all over the Epstein list, which is why he doesn't want the list to come out. That's, if I had to guess, if I had to put money on it, it would be that. How are you friends with a pedophile for decades? You see all of these women that come in and out. How are you and then for Trump to say, yeah, he's a great guy. He likes women. He likes them young. Okay, why are you saying that? Unless you've seen something to give indication that these are the women he preferred, children. You were the guy's buddy for a very long time as he fucked children. Put it in context. It's not a leap to point out that Donald Trump most likely is all throughout the list, which is the reason why he's throwing his body to protect pedophiles as we speak, to try to prevent that information from coming out to the public. Your government has been compromised in more ways than one. And the head person seems to be one of those people that are also compromised. Who are you having tomorrow? Pink Rose. Pink Rose, that is a damn good question. David is going to be on the show. Caleb Maupin, he's going to be talking about Venezuela. He's going to be on at, I believe, 9. Who's going to be on at 7? I need to see who's going to be on at 7. And we may slip another guest in. We may have about 4 guests tomorrow. I need to get somebody for the 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock is always hard because nobody wants to get up at 7 in the morning to do anything, let alone do a show and have to think critically. But so far, David, what is his last name? I want to get his last name right. I don't want to butcher his name. He's a damn good guest. He's a new guest. David Udayan. David Udayan. He's going to be on the show. Caleb Maupin is going to be on the show. I need to get somebody for 7. And I want to get somebody domestically to cover the Epstein thing. But I'm not sure if people even care. Like, I don't know how emphatic people are about the Epstein thing at this point. But we'll see. I talked to Daniel Lazar. I hit him up, but I didn't get back to him. Well, he didn't get back to me until a little bit late. To be fair, I didn't hit him until late last night, so he wasn't able to come on. But Jeff Rich talked about France, and we covered that story pretty well. I want to get somebody to hit Nepal. I want to get somebody to hit Indonesia. I don't know anybody to hit those 2 topics. But we'll see. I still have time. Yeah, I still have time. All right. We get Michael Tracy. I tried to get Michael Tracy. Michael Tracy doesn't want to come on the show. I have tried. Get that iPhone. Fuck that. Never again. I don't want propagandists on the show. I want people who actually can have conversations. Did you hear Qatar was bombed? So that was the story that I hit. Where is it? The one that just came out. Right here. TD Geopolitics hits the story. Chairman for Hamas Political Bureau, I think this is Khaled Mashal, has reportedly been killed. Senior Hamas official told Al Jazeera the movement's negotiating. What? Told Al Jazeera the movement's negotiating team was attacked during a meeting in Doha, Qatar, while discussing the ceasefire ideas put forward by Trump. So when they say attacked, I don't know what attack means. I don't know if that means bombed or what. Let's check Press TV. Maybe they would have it. And yes, right here. Israel launches airstrikes on Doha to assassinate Hamas leaders. So Qatar has just been attacked by Israel. Qatar has just been attacked by Israel. What is Qatar going to do about this? What are the other Gulf states going to do about this? Now, we've made the point before that Greater Israel runs through many of these Quisling governments. And as they stand by and do everything in their power to assist Israel as it bombed Iran, as it murdered Palestinians, now what? Now what? Israeli warplanes have launched airstrikes on the headquarters of Hamas resistance movement in Qatar, capital Doha, and what Israel media described as, quote, an assassination operation, unquote. The airstrike came as Hamas leaders were reportedly convened to discuss the latest U.S. proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza. Never trust the United States. As a rule, I don't know why anybody trusts the U.S. for anything. This is old hat for the U.S., right? Hey, we're going to have negotiations with Iran, and you attack Iran. Hey, we're going to have negotiations, and Soleimani is going to go to Iraq, and you murder Soleimani and the people that are associated with them. And of course, you have the bombings here. This is old hat. At some point, people are going to realize you can't trust the United States. The Israeli military issued a statement confirming that it had conducted what it called a, quote, precise strike targeting Hamas senior leadership. This was a political bureau, by the way. A senior Israeli official told Channel 13 that Hamas leader Khalid, well, the name is different, chairman of the political bureau in West Bank, were in the meeting when it was struck. So yeah, Israel has bombed another neighboring country. Israel has bombed another neighboring country. And let's see if Donald Trump has anything to say about this. I would wager to you, he will not. He will not. All right, call it a day. Just now send Kevin Wayne. I'll check it out, Kevin. Thank you for that. International Gangster Coalition. Well, these people are they're sociopaths with the U.S. backing as sociopaths. This is not a rogue state. I hope you understand. This is a state that is effectively under control and auspices of the United States and can do nothing without the U.S. permission to do so. Why don't they negotiate with the UN? That's a good question. That's a good question. That is a very good question. Probably because the UN is no longer a body to get anything accomplished. It's a talking shop. And it's not a talking shop that gets anything accomplished. When the UN Security Council passed the resolution calling for a ceasefire, what did the U.S. say? The U.S. came out and said, this is a non-binding resolution. This is a non-binding resolution, meaning we don't need to care about this. The UN Security Council doesn't do non-binding resolutions. But at that point, you have a broken international system. I keep saying, and people hate it when I say it, but it's true. There is no such thing as international law. You're in the law of the jungle. Your ability is not, you will not be protected. There is no Leviathan. There is no God above that's going to come to your aid. Your ability to protect yourself is going to be entirely within your own hands. All of the things that many of these countries did in order to try to bring down hostilities only provoke hostilities. You were warned. Behave accordingly. Like, share, subscribe. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind. Have a good one all. Be safe.